Okay.
All right.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our special episode of Exploring the Lord of the Rings. This is episode number 122, and more importantly, this is our crossover episode with Alan and Sean, the hosts of the Prancing Pony podcast, who are joining us here today to celebrate this occasion on which they have swept past us, and we are here in Exploring the Lord of the Rings, watching their the dust cloud of their passage fade off into the distance there.
We're like dwarves. We're very dangerous over short distances.
Exactly.
Natural sprinters.
Yep.
Exactly. So I'm hoping that everything is coming through. Audio is coming through. For this is a truly complex audio setup that we have going on here tonight. So it took us a little time to get things loaded. But of course, you guys probably didn't even notice because I started at my normal time. So that's all fine.
And that's all right. We like a challenge, right? Technical challenge.
Yeah. Good. Okay, so, and let's see, I think I'm good. All right, I think everything should be going okay on Twitch there. Let me know if that's not okay on Twitch. And, okay, excellent. So, before I start off tonight, just a couple quick announcements, because I've got a little bit of a Signum business and stuff just to let everybody know about. First, Moot announcements. Bay Moot is coming up. If you are in the San Francisco Bay Area, we're going to be meeting in Berkeley on the 23rd of November. So you can go to signumuniversity.org, scroll down just a little bit to our events panel there, and you'll be able to click on the Bay Moot page. The registration is live. The call for papers is there. So definitely look forward to being able to see any of you guys in the Bay Area not next month. It's already November. This month on the 23rd in 2.5 weeks. So I encourage you to go ahead and register for that. And the call for papers for TextMoot. TextMoot isn't until February 8th, but the TextMoot people are super organized. So they have their call for paper ready already. So if you go to textmoot.org, you can find the call for papers for that. So really fun Moot stuff coming up. We have a lot of... I was just sort of reviewing this stuff earlier on with our Moot coordinator, and we have 10... moots planned for the 2020 calendar year.
Wow.
10 regional moots in addition to Myth Moot. So we're officially adding at least one and possibly two new moots this coming year. Maple Moot, Toronto, it's happening. We're going to go to Toronto and Japan. So we're going to be, in fact, we're going to do moots in 3 non-American countries in 2 months. This coming year, so that's going to be a lot of fun. Anyway, so yeah, that's that's the Moot business, and then the last thing. Don't forget that tomorrow night we begin our new book discussion in the Mythgard Academy, having finished Sauron Defeated in our march through the history of the Lord of the Ring, the history of Middle-earth. We are starting our non-Tolkien book, which is going to be A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula Le Guin, and we're going to be starting Wizard of Earthsea tomorrow night, Wednesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find the link for that on the Mythgard website. So that's the stuff that is happening, or at least that is some of the stuff that is happening soon, that I wanted to make sure that everybody knew about. Okay, so Alan and Sean, welcome to Exploring the Lord of the Rings. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Yes, it is.
Thank you very much.
You guys are here in the Discord chat, so you'll be able to see the comments and everything that we do. This is I try to make this as interactive as possible, so we'll be doing a lot of responding to folks here in the Discord chat.
Okay.
And we'll.
So for the folks on Twitch, do we say here's what so and so said on Discord, and then we respond to it?
Yeah, I generally
sure.
I generally do read the comments out before we respond, because and then of course a lot of people are watching the recorded video later on, so they won't.
That's true.
Have any access to it at all. So yep.
Okay.
So yeah, exactly. So tonight we're going to be talking about the reactions to Bilbo's song, having just spent our last 5 sessions discussing the poem. we
I feel woefully inadequate now.
let's see.
Lightning pace, Alan. Lightning pace.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to. So we're going to talk about the reactions. I have aspirations of getting through the whole post-poem conversation today, up through the Bilbo's private explanations to Frodo. So we'll see how well we do there. Especially since, of course, as usual, despite my own inclination to dash on ahead very quickly, many of you are trying as usual to slow me down and go back and talk about the poem more. So I'm going to start off with a couple questions and comments from the discussion board. And so for Sean and Alan, you'll be able to see the text of this on the Twitch channel.
Okay.
If you want to see
Yeah,
what I'm looking at here. Okay. So the first question, was there any connection between all the water imagery of Frodo's fugue state and the fact that the next thing he becomes conscious of is Bilbo reciting the Song of Eärendil, which is mostly about someone sailing, on water? We could look at this from two ways, from Tolkien skillfully and masterfully drawing us into the song, and let's be frank, he considered Eärendil to be the keystone of Middle-earth, so he's quite deliberately greasing the rails to guide the reader into his cornerstone tale, or from the perspective of the story itself. What is happening at the moment? What are the elves singing about when Frodo's listening to them first? If we look at this line, visions of far lands and bright things that he had never yet imagined opened out before him, and the firelit hall became like a golden mist above seas of foam that sighed upon the margins of the world. Could it be that they too are telling the same tale? A warm-up act for Bilbo? Or perhaps a coincidence? Or maybe it's just because they are elves and sing of the sea and Valinor and of the past and of home? Great question. And Eye for Detail, appreciate that. And thank you for quoting that. I was going to have to go back and dig up that slide again if you hadn't. So this is right. This is in the description when Frodo is enchanted, right? When he begins listening to the elf music and he is kind of transported into that other place. And it does seem to be an example of enchantment. And of course, I'm using enchantment in Tolkien's technical sense, right? When you are affected by a work of art and kind of taken out and you sort of perceive yourself to be within the story that is being told to you, right? When when you are able to mistake the secondary world of the story told for the primary world, like when it looks like the primary world around you, right? That's the effect that elvish song has on people, and we see it apparently having that effect on Frodo here. And Eye for Detail, I appreciate your coming back to this because I hadn't been thinking about that in connection with the poem, and you're right. I would have thought that it was just sort of imagery, right? I mean, just kind of imagery to sort of capture Frodo's sense, Frodo's experience. I wouldn't have attached a narrative concept to it apart from the line about sighing upon the margins of the world, right? It's not just any ocean imagery that he's surrounded by, right? It is seas of foam that sighed upon the margins of the world, giving us a definite sort of Valinorian context, right? So that does imply, I agree with Eye for Detail, it definitely suggests a kind of narrative content to the elvish song that Frodo is listening to before that. The one thing, let me go back again to apart from the sighing upon the margins of the world thing. Again, if it weren't for that, I would think it was merely metaphorical in the sense of trying to capture Frodo's experience. Remember that this is the falling into deep water. Appears to be a metaphor that we see Tolkien use that on several occasions, right? Remember, Frodo felt like he was falling into deep water when he collapsed by the ford, right? And like it was not just the sound of the rushing water that he was hearing, like he felt he himself was going underwater. Remember, Merry said the same thing in Bree when he's just, I thought I had fallen into deep water. So, I mean, there's, and at Tom Bombadil's house, Ardent Crayon, yeah, you're absolutely right. And good, Mad Violinist was just thinking about the fallen into deep water too. That metaphor seems to be a fairly pervasive one. So I can certainly imagine Frodo just sort of having the experience of having his senses overwhelmed by the elvish song and being transported to if that were being described in those kind of aquatic terms, it would seem to fit with that sense of losing oneself and one's own kind of will and perspective being submerged, either pleasantly, presumably in this case, or unpleasantly, as when under the influence of the ring wraiths and the proximity of the ring wraiths and stuff. Good. Mad Violinist is also remembering Tom Bombadil's metaphor. Clothes are but little loss if you escape from drowning, as he says to them when they wake up again. So metaphorically speaking, that's pretty dominant. But then again, we get to sighing upon the margins of the world, making this elvish ocean, right, that Frodo is swimming in, much more specifically situated. I personally incline to Eifert de Tail's final idea there, that like elvish song contains the idea of the Sea of Valinor and of Elvenhome, and that, you know, when they are likely to be singing about the sea. After all, these are some of the very elves that Sam has heard that are sailing away and leaving us, right? So the ocean, and especially the bits of the ocean that sigh upon the margins of the world, are doubtless on their minds, right? So one can easily imagine that might be what they're singing about. I never thought of this as a kind of transition, right? That is related to the Song of Eärendil specifically. I don't know that I see it necessarily as a warm-up act or as an allusion or them singing the same Eärendil story. I don't see anything that's, again, if we didn't have the Eärendil poem and that's all we have, I don't see any evidence here to connect that
this is
to
a reference
Eärendil.
to the Eärendil.
Specifically. But if they're thinking about the sea and they're thinking about Elvenhome and they're thinking about sailing west and they're singing about that, the transition from that to Eärendil becomes particularly poignant, I would think, right? I mean, with the elves singing about sailing off into the west, and then Eärendil, having the story of Eärendil who sailed off into the west, but from a mortal perspective, right? Then wanting to get back to the mortal lands and not being able to get back to the mortal land. You know, he was on the one-way trip, which of course means something very different to the Eärendil of the poem than it means presumably to the elves who are singing the song.
Right.
True.
So, yeah, I think
one thought on that, Corey. I wonder, you know, when you first started talking about enchantment and you know, the sort of the sub-creative act that's inherent with this poetry, I started thinking of the fact that water is the element that has the greatest echo of the music of the Ainur, which of course is purely perfectly sub-creative music.
Yeah.
And I wondered if maybe if there's a narrative connection, maybe it's not Eärendil, maybe it's more a connection to that. Maybe it's this idea that elvish music has this sort of liquid quality to it because the music of the Ainur is closely related with water. I don't know.
Yeah, and that link back through to Ulmo, as a couple of people were referring to Ulmo, and we had been thinking about Ulmo in conjunction, for instance, with Frodo's dream that he has in Buckland, because there's water stuff that comes up, and so we were like, well, it's not like a smoking gun exactly, but knowing that visions come from Ulmo and things, it seemed at least defensible that Frodo was actually, because we were asking, like, why is Frodo having these visions? Like, what is going on? Visions don't just happen spontaneously. Like, something is happening there. What's happening? I don't, so the water connection, Sean, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense to me. It seems to make more sense to sort of connect water rather than thinking of it as like the medium of messages from Ulmo, right? Just that general echo of the music seems to me, especially in this context with the Elvish song, that the way in which Frodo would be kind of picking up on the kind of echoes, right? Of the, that the Elvish song would be, in a sense, I would think, one of the clearest echoes of the music of the Ainur that Frodo would have heard, right?
Right.
I would think that that's one of the reasons why Elvish singing is not a thing to miss, as Bilbo would say, right? Okay, so
I mean, as much as I would always love to tie anything back to Eärendil, yeah.
right, exactly, exactly.
Uh,
And Bilbo is going to transition.
All right, who had
to
7
Eärendil.
minutes in the pool for Sean mentioning Eärendil again?
Hey, I was prompted. All
right,
Yeah, well, there's plenty of excuse in this episode.
that's true.
You guys will have to go a little further out of your way to say something slighting about Fëanor, but it could still probably happen.
Oh, I'm sure it'll happen. Don't worry
We'll
about
find a
that.
way.
We will find a
We'll find a
way.
way.
Yeah.
Where's that pinata?
Whack.
All right. So, second question is from I know one of our mutual friends here. This is from Christopher Bartlett, who is the mad violinist on Discord here.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
And it's also his birthday. Happy birthday, Christopher.
happy
Indeed. Happy birthday.
Yeah, I saw him at Middlemoot and told him that this was the date of our crossover episode, and he was like, "My birthday!" There we go, just for you, Christopher. Okay, so
That's awesome.
Here is Christopher's excellent question.
All right.
He says, I know that we are extremely cautious about asking why Tolkien does the things he does, but I'm left wondering why he included the lovely, tragic Eärendil poem, or if I want to reframe that question in Professor Olson's more preferred style, what does it accomplish to include the Eärendil poem? We can look to the most comparable example, the Luthien poem, but there are striking differences. While both poems are similar in that they emphasize the experiences of their protagonists over the effects of their gallantry on the larger sweep of the myth cycle of the Elder Days, Tolkien gives us this mythical context, at least in brief, for the Luthien poem, whereas we're left to wonder about why Eärendil was sailing, what his errand was in the first place, and why he's given his undying doom. And so just a side note, Alan and Sean, for you guys, one of the things that we're one of the coolest part of exploring the Lord of the Rings for me is that, like, almost every week I learn new stuff that, like, I never ever noticed before. And for me, the biggest revelation about the Eärendil poem as we were discussing it through is I had never realized how little it actually says about Eärendil. It never mentions.
It doesn't tell
what
the
he
story
does.
at all, does it?
It doesn't.
Yeah.
No, it leaves out almost the entire story. So one of the things we were focusing on was, okay, what is this poem about? Like, if you just say it's about the Eärendil story, that's actually not even true. It's about Eärendil, but that's not the emphasis of the story. And we were even noticing how much the poem goes into the passive voice all the way through the whole middle. Like, stuff just keeps happening. It's not about what Eärendil does. It's emphatically not like a heroic story of Eärendil's accomplishments. Not only does it even not tell them, it hides them even actively, syntactically by
it does.
saying these things just sort of occur. Anyway, so we were emphasizing how so Christopher points out how both, you know, the Luthien poem that we got several chapters ago and the Eärendil poem here, neither one of them is really tells the story, right? The story, the Luthien poem that we get, the Beren and Luthien poem, if you didn't know the story, would tell you almost nothing. You know, that last stanza gives a tiny little glimpse into the plot that comes after the meeting of Beren and Luthien, but the poem is almost always all about Beren and Luthien, and about their experience when they meet each other. Right. And then that last stanza points to the future, but it really only points to the future, like their future of what they feel and experience. In Aragorn's pro-synopsis, we get more, which is then the argument here that Christopher makes. Okay, so he says, with the Luthien poem, we can see how Aragorn is using this mythical tale to protect the hobbits from the effects of the Nazgul siege. On another level, because of Aragorn's summary of the events of the story, we can see these events as a piece of the larger story of which the Lord of the Rings is the culmination. And of course, we can conclude that the Luthien poem is the hinge upon which Tolkien's understanding that the Lord of the Rings is a part of the larger tale turns. By contrast, we are given one of Michael Drout's textual ruins in the Eärendil poem, but it is less clear to me what function this fulfills, other than a flash of beauty from a seemingly unlikely source. Remember, what we've seen of Bilbo's poetry thus far is far from epic, with the possible exception of The Road Goes Ever On and On, A careful reader, without the context of the Silmarillion, would be able to conclude that Eärendil is related to Elrond and might know that a Silmaril is something important from the Elder Days, connected through the Luthien poem, but we do not have anything but a very hazy idea of the Elder Days, what significance Silmarils have, and no idea at all of why Eärendil might have been sailing to the end of the world.
Right.
Maybe it's enough that it's beautiful. But given the thought with which we know Tolkien chose what else to include, I'm unsatisfied with beauty as the sole explanation for the presence of this long poem. I'm glad it's there, but I'd love to have some thoughts about the reason, or if you prefer, the function of this work within the larger context of The Lord of the Rings. So this is a great question.
Wow,
Why,
yeah, it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why does Tolkien include this poem? Or what is the effect of Tolkien? As you know, Christopher was anticipating me. I always ask why questions and immediately correct myself, because I love asking these questions, but I don't want to make it sound like I'm just trying to get inside Tolkien's head and be like, what was he thinking at this moment? Because we can't ever know that. But we can see, like, what are the effects of the
effect it has in the text.
Yeah. The effect of the choice he made to include it, which is essentially the same as saying, why did he do it? Okay, so I think, the Eärendil poem, if we look at the impact of the poem itself, that is, thinking through the analysis that we've been doing, what the story of that song is, right? What is the song that Bilbo is singing? And I certainly, Christopher is clearly right, we get very little in terms of plot, right? We wouldn't even know how important the Eärendil story was. We couldn't really guess that from this poem, I think. But what we do, we were noticing that the primary emphasis in this story is Eärendil's brave sailing off into the west, doing something important that we're never really told, and then having the mighty doom laid upon him, right? Being elevated to the, so he is, he's elevated, right? You know, there's the apotheosis that he undergoes, so we can see that he is being, on the one hand, given grace beyond any other mortal, right? I mean, he's made into an orbited star, which is great, but it's got some restrictions, right? And the restriction,
there's a to-do list.
Yeah,
There's a few drawbacks.
There is, and then of course when the mighty doom comes back, right, and we get the second, the first, and I love the way that we get those two references, right? The first reference to the doom that is laid on him by Elbereth makes it sound like a pure, a pure blessing, right? Mighty doom was.
That's when it's a mighty doom the first time, right?
He's given. He's being elevated to the stars. That's amazing. And then the second time, it's when he's trying to get back that on him mighty doom is laid. You know, now the mighty doom, it's clear, is preventing him from being able ever to return to mortal lands. And that seems to be the emphasis. Like, what are the consequences, both the blessing and the cost for mortals of this kind of interaction with one of the other things we were noticing, that apart from Elbereth, who is named, the Valar are practically downplayed, right? Yeah. I mean, they we don't even know. They're referred to by unclear pronouns. You know, there's
they built for him.
Yes, there's a lot of theys involved.
Yeah, it's like, who exactly built the new ship for him or upgraded the ship? Yeah,
exactly. So until Elbereth is mentioned, it sounds like it's maybe the elves. Like, it's like, how could we know it would be anybody else? So again, and one of the consequences of that is that it seems to me to make the whole story a little bit more relevant to specifically to Bilbo's situation, right? This is not just a question of like going to Valinor is dangerous, because if you go to Valinor, who knows what might happen, right? But that's like not really a danger that's likely to confront most people most of the time, right? Right. However, interacting with elves, now that's still unusual, but that's more attainable, right? That's something that could happen to the unwary, right? Who stumble across them in Woodall or something, right? When you interact with the elves, you know, when you interact with the undying ones, whether they be elves or whether they be Valar, then these things can happen to, you know, when you leave the mortal world, right? then you potentially have these consequences.
It changes you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So yeah, I think that the idea that this is in some sense a kind of caution, that he's sort of using the Eärendil story as a cautionary tale, seems to me to kind of, is that enough to kind of answer the question why is it that he has Bilbo singing this? I mean, one of the things, of course, if we think about to the larger context in the plot, right? We've just met Bilbo again. Frodo and Bilbo have just been reunited. They've been apart for 17 years. One of the first big questions, of course, is what is the effect of the ring, right? Bilbo giving up the ring, and Frodo now has the ring, and so of course, so the first thing that we see when they're together there in the Hall of Fire is that question, right? The sort of the ring issue comes to crisis first. But then there's the next question of like, so Bilbo, you've moved to Rivendell now, right? You have left the Shire, and you now live full time. You know, you've retired and lived with the elves. What's that like?
I thought about Palm Beach, but the prices were a little steep. I moved to Rivendell instead.
Exactly. Yeah, I can just mooch off Elrond.
He's got a
pretty
really
much
cool
indefinitely.
shuffleboard court, you know, real cool
absolutely.
shuffleboard.
So I think that, and good, yet, Veronica, as you say, Bilbo never goes home, right? He never goes back to the Shire again. And remember, at this point, we have evidence to believe that he's being actively prevented from going home, right? Gandalf won't let him go, but he offered, right? And Gandalf says, no, you can't go back. So there is, I think, a good parallel there, right? Of Bilbo who cannot return to the Shire, and again, it's a blessing, right? I mean, he's been welcomed into Rivendell. He's living the dream on the one hand, Sam's dream, certainly, right? And yet he can't return. And he also did a thing, right? He did a kind of heroic thing. But again, the consequence of that heroic thing is that now he can't go home. So now, Eärendil, I do agree that there is another utility in the fact that, I mean, there are going to be references to Eärendil as we move forward in The Lord of the Rings. But
and this does kind of set those up, doesn't it? I mean, you understand what the file means later on. You understand what it means that Elrond is his son. Yes. But anyway, sorry.
I also want to point out something that one of the other users in Discord mentioned. Valamoinen said something that kind of jived with what I was thinking, which is this: that at the time Tolkien was writing The Lord of the Rings, he really didn't have any other chance of getting this out. But he had written it how many times? Written and rewritten and rewritten and rewritten. It kind of makes me think a little bit about the Troll song as well. You know, and the fact that here's a piece of poetry that he's been working on for years that he's found a way to fit into his mythology. And the same here. This is one that he just really wanted to find a place to get it in. And what better place to put it than the Hall of Fire? Yeah. And to have Bilbo singing it adds a little bit of cheek, as we'll find out later. But I tend to think there's a little bit of motivation there. Like, just, I want to get this out. Yeah. And this is the only place I can put it.
But I also really like the foreshadowing that it does. And I think the other thing Eärendil said was it does foreshadow Frodo's own journey, doesn't it? Because just as Eärendil can't ever go back to Middle-earth, Frodo can never really return home. After his enchanting journey. That makes it sound better than it is, but
a mighty doom laid on him, and then you're right, he can't go back to where he belonged.
Absolutely. And the thing to remember, though, it does set up the references later on, but it doesn't set it up in the way that we might initially assume or sort of want it to. Again, it doesn't set it up plot-wise.
It's true.
Like, we don't but what it does,
you only get him if you already know the story.
Exactly. Right. Which, of course, in 1954 was like 3 people,
4 people.
Yeah, exactly. So, but here I'm particularly thinking of course, the great scene in Mordor, right, when Sam sees the star, right, and of course with the File of Galadriel and the significance that has. one thing that we do know about Eärendil after the poem is the light and the star thing, right? So that
Right.
Yeah.
and that it's something I'm going to be really interested to come back to when we get to those points, which we should do by the 2030s. Is
Truth hurts, man. Truth hurts.
it's we were so Evil Dr. Cannon, who is here tonight, he's a physicist, and he plotted out our progression and projected when we were going to end, which at that point was 2031, but we've slowed down since then, so I think we're no longer on that pace anymore.
2037 or something like that.
Probably something like that.
Yeah.
But, anyway, but anyway, the point is, when we get to those references, it'll be interesting to remember back to the context that Frodo and Sam themselves actually have, like what Eärendil and the story of Eärendil means to them. Now, of course, we can't know for sure that they haven't been told the fuller story of Eärendil. I mean, heck, they might have found somebody to tell them the story of Eärendil that Tolkien never wrote while they were in Rivendell,
Right.
during that time.
Right.
So we can't necessarily assume that they don't know the whole story, but again, the readers don't know it, so recalling the context of the way. So I guess this means, Christopher, one of the other things that I would say there is that it's not just the story, right? It's not just the Eärendil as character or as like really important background character or something. It isn't only that. Ray, I see you teasing me there.
Oh my gosh, these are hilarious.
Yeah, so Ray was saying, episode 333, what is meant when Tolkien used the word it? I can absolutely see our discussion.
Why did he choose to use a semicolon here instead of a comma?
Yeah.
We talked about that
Why?
in the poem.
Why not parentheticals?
Yeah. No, we've all all of the regular attendees in this class and I have all been doing estate planning around participation.
Exactly.
There are several people who've said that they're going to like bequeath to their heirs particular comments they've been waiting to make about the battle at Minas Tirith, So
And Alan, we've joked about leaving our show to our kids someday.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And
This is
this
serious.
is serious.
Yeah.
Because,
No, really,
ours
it's
is
gonna be-
maybe 7 more years, maybe.
Yeah.
It may be needed.
And that includes Unfinished Tales and
We might
a
leave our
rerun
kids
of the
the second half
Silmarillion.
of Peoples of Middle Earth, but that's about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so yeah, I do think that it's important. It's going to be important for us to remember the context of this, because here's the other thing. Christopher, thinking back to the comments you were making about Tolkien's own inclusion of this, right? Tolkien's motivations in including it. That is the outside of the story versions of that. The cool thing that we get there, and this is all in I think it's chapter 3 of Treason of Isengard. So you can see that shift. So in the last session 2 weeks ago, we looked at the history. We looked at the original Errantry poem, and then we looked at that intermediate stage, the one where it's definitely a mortal person who's being abducted by the elves and then promoted and then kills Ungoliant, so he kind of becomes Eärendil halfway through and has lightning shooting out of his eyes and all kinds of super exciting things.
I wish we'd covered that. That would have been a lot of fun,
awesome.
I gotta admit.
It's pretty awesome, that guy.
Someday.
Yeah. But anyway, the point is that shift starts happening. The shift from Errantry. So he takes the Errantry poem, which is still in its Errantry state, right? The little funny little fairy dude doing, fighting bumblebees and dragonflies. He starts with that poem. So when he makes the decision to say, I want Bilbo to sing this song, it's still in that state. But he never has Bilbo sing it in that state. As soon as he decides to put it in Bilbo's mouth in the Hall of Fire, it begins to change. And the first,
He has to
that
elevate
first
it,
version, that first version of the mortal dude who isn't explicitly identified with Eärendil, but kind of transforms into Eärendil halfway through until he is the Flammifer of Westerness at the end. That happens. That's what happens when he puts it in Bilbo's mouth in the Hall of Fire. So therefore it seems to me that and we were looking at how much stronger even that that theme of mortal who wanders into fairy and is blessed and elevated thereby, but then also constrained and doomed as a result. How much stronger that theme was in that intermediate poem, even. So that seems to be for Tolkien a really important element of what he was trying to accomplish through Bilbo's poem here. So I think that's a really I think that's a really interesting possibility. Yeah. Yeah. And Mike says the crazy thing is that the first version tells the whole story. Yeah, including like full action sequence with the slaying of Ungoliant and everything. Mm-hmm. And the second version tells almost nothing. Right. Yeah. No, I mean, that's one of the things that I love in looking at the evolution of the, of the drafts and things, is looking at the direction it's going, right?
Yeah.
And you can see that the direction it maintains that mortal interacting with the fairy world element of that second story, but it makes it less and less and less about the heroics, right? And and really, in a sense, thereby I think comes to emphasize even more that element of the mighty doom, basically, that is laid on Eärendil. Belangsmont, exactly. Bilbo's voice does make it much more passively.
So do you think it makes it less about sort of the adventure aspect of it?
Yeah.
And more about that apotheosis you were talking about, that transcendence, and does that make it more Frodo-ish even though it's still in Bilbo's voice? Maybe I'm still too attached to the idea of it foreshadowing Frodo's story.
No, I think I know that I didn't have a chance to. I wasn't able to put it on a slide. Flamifer, who is here tonight, was putting forth that theory that the intermediate version is more Bilbo, and the final version, the version that's in the book, is more Frodo, and I can see that. I think, has Bilbo prepared this really sort of with Frodo in mind? Is there a kind of message for Frodo in this? Is the question. And I think, that's certainly conceivable. We know that Frodo's been there for days, right? And Bilbo is preparing this poem as if at the last minute, right? When he's, while the feast is going on. So it doesn't seem like something Bilbo has, written months ago and is just pulling out of his satchel, for performance tonight. So I think that it's certainly possible, therefore, that he means this performance in a sense to be kind of targeted to Frodo.
Towards Frodo. But then how does he know what Frodo is going to go through by the end of the book? He doesn't
even know that Frodo's going to be the one taking the ring.
But he's going to be selected. He doesn't even know that anybody's going to Mordor with the ring. So unless Bilbo is a conduit for something else. Unless this is an inspired poem. Is Frodo being called here?
Yeah, it is possible. Now, so here's the main thing that gives me hesitation is that moment, which the three of us talked about in your episode a little while back, and we discussed here a couple months ago now.
Oh, the shadow between
shadow between them. That scene.
Yeah.
And the main thing that I would emphasize there is Bilbo's understanding, like that moment of insight that Bilbo gets when he now finally gets it. He understands the significance of these things. I think that he is capable of foreseeing enough that even though the ring hasn't been officially it hasn't been decided that it's being sent to Mordor yet, and it hasn't been decided that Frodo's definitely going to take it, I could totally believe that after this, Bilbo can predict both of those things, that he would have some kind of a sense that that's going to be what ends up having to happen, and that he, from his own experience, both from his own experience of his there and back journey and his experience of owning the ring and understanding what that means and the implications of that, and his own experience with not being able to go home and all that kind of thing, that he could put together some kind of sense of what it would mean for Frodo. But my problem is he's only learned that 15 minutes ago, when he sings the poem. So it would have to be pretty extemporaneous. And although it sounds like he's, prepping up to the last minute, I doubt he's being as spontaneous as all that. So I have a hard time believing that Frodo's poem is intended by Bilbo for Frodo.
By Bilbo for Frodo,
Yeah. So exactly as Palandor says in the Twitch chat, there seems to be a bit too much normal poetic preparation of Bilbo's poem, like run-throughs with Aragorn, right, before he recites it, to have the feel of like an inspired poem with Bilbo as conduit.
He doesn't just, he's not Cadman there.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Right.
Sing of Eärendil, right? Yeah. That's not what's happening there.
Right.
So... Yes, Barkwolf, the feast was in Frodo's honor. At least that's what Bilbo says. I hear all this feasting was in your honor, right? He wasn't seated in the place of honor. I agree. Though, again, I'm still wanting to do a reenactment there. We never got to do our reenactment at Middlemoot. So one of these days, I want to reenact the seating arrangements at the feast because I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me. I need to see it in order to. I need to block that out in order for that to make sense. Yeah. Now Matt is asking if Bilbo is doing an oral composition or if this is a written work. We don't get any reference to like paper or a notebook when Frodo comes in and sees Bilbo there. He only sees his snack on the floor next to him. I don't know that I would rule it out for that reason. I mean, do we have to believe that Bilbo is composing entirely without paper? I mean, he does seem to be a writer himself, Bilbo usually to write. So I'm not sure about that, Matt. It's a good question. I think I was assuming it was a written work. He would perform it, reciting it. And it may well be that by the time he'd gotten to this stage, he's already written it, he's already memorized it. He's going to recite it for Aragorn to have Aragorn's input, right, and make some tweaks of it there. But I don't think he's going to be redoing whole sections of it. But anyway, okay. Well, let's take the radical step. And we're only about an hour in, so this is pretty normal, of actually starting our discussion of the text itself. Okay.
There's our problem, Sean. We get to the text after about 20 minutes.
Right.
Yes, I can teach you all kinds of ways to go slower.
I know, seriously.
Okay.
There's a text.
The feet of the master
text.
here.
Okay.
Yeah.
The chanting ceased. Frodo opened his eyes and saw that Bilbo was seated on his stool in a circle of listeners, who were smiling and applauding. "Now we had better have it again," said an elf. Bilbo got up and bowed. "I am flattered, Lindir," he said, "but it would be too tiring to repeat it all." "Not too tiring for you," the elves answered, laughing. "You know you are never tired of reciting your own verses. But really, we cannot answer your question at one hearing." "What?" cried Bilbo. "You can't tell which parts were mine and which were the Dúnedain's?" "It is not easy for us to tell the difference between two mortals," said the elf. "Nonsense, Lindir," snorted Bilbo. "If you can't distinguish between a man and a hobbit, your judgment is poorer than I imagined. They're as different as peas and apples." "Maybe. To sheep, other sheep no doubt appear different," laughed Lindir, "or to shepherds. But mortals have not been our study. We have other business." First observation I would make about this. for everybody who doesn't like the tra-la-la-lolly elves of chapter 3 of The Hobbit, did you hear that? That is exactly the tone that Lindir uses with Bilbo.
Oh, yeah.
Don't dip your beard in the foam, father, right? It's exactly the same tone. Not too tiring for you. You know, you're never tired of reciting your own verses. It is exactly the same register that the Rivendell elves of chapter 3 of The Hobbit speak in. So apart from the fact that no one actually says tra-la-la-lolly, you wouldn't... I mean, I honestly think that the gap that people perceive in the chapter 3 Hobbits... Hobbit elves and the Lord of the Rings elves would be much, much less if the Hobbit poem were simply removed. If all we had was the dialogue from the elves, I think people would hear the consistency much more clearly. But because people have this reaction to the Tra-la-la-lolly song, they're like, oh no, I just can't make that jive with the Lord of the Rings elves at all. And it's like, well, okay. But yeah, and now Great Green Dragon, I agree. Excuse me, Green Great Dragon. These elves are really
You of all
good.
people should know you can't call it a Great Green Dragon.
Right, yeah. You're doing it wrong, man. But anyway, that you're right. They are very good at hobbitry. We were looking at the ways in which Bilbo and Elrond even banter, right?
Yeah.
You know, the way that we see Bilbo bantering even with Elrond. And with Lindir, it's much more pronounced, right? If you look at the digs they make at each other, my favorite, Bilbo's comment, right? I mean, nonsense, Lindir, if you can't distinguish between a man and a hobbit, your judgment is poorer than I imagined. Like, I already knew your judgment was poor, right? But it's even worse than I thought if you can't distinguish between a man and a hobbit. I mean, that's pretty good right there.
That is. That's good stuff.
Yeah, it really is. So this is, and again, very much like go back to the last chapter of The Hobbit and read the discussion that Bilbo and the elves have out his bedroom window, right, when they wake him up singing their song. I get very, very, very like this, right? I kind of like to think that Lindir was one of those elves who sang the lullaby that would waken a drunken goblin.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and Brandon, you're absolutely right. Elrond is way better at hobbitry than Aragorn is. We had been talking about how Aragorn seems to be the only one who doesn't get into the spirit. He's like the total straight man when he comes over and is talking to Bilbo and Frodo, and he's just does not get into it, right? He doesn't.
He's just trying to look cool in front of Arwen, though, right?
Well, yeah, he's just standing back there, kind of, what's your problem over there, man?
Yeah. He's
just a little flexing for
he's
Arwen
got an image
there.
to maintain. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got to be serious, man. He can't get down into the gutter with these guys.
Yeah, but Mary, you're absolutely right. Lindir and Bilbo are clearly close friends, as you can tell from how they're insulting each other. Now, of course, the real joke, which Bilbo doesn't spring even in public, right? He waits till he's talking to Frodo, which we'll do on the next slide, is that the whole thing was a trick question from the beginning, right?
Right.
There's nothing to tell.
Yeah. Which parts, plural?
It was
There's
all
no
mine.
parts, plural. What are you talking about?
Right.
It's a total trick question.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so okay. So what are some of the other?
Sorry, there's a comment in the Discord that I have to read. It was Aragorn, 80-year-old awkward teenager at the Raucous house party. I can identify with that. That's good stuff right there.
Exactly.
Thank you. Thank you,
Uncle
Shmuel
Elrond,
Rock. That's
don't
good stuff.
embarrass me in front of Arwen.
Seriously,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to be distracting.
Yeah,
It's what I do. We
Yeah.
digress. I mean,
that's right.
you brought us here. It's going to happen.
You knew what he was getting into.
Yeah.
Right. Now, as Evil Dr. Cannon points out, Bilbo is in fact not only just being cheeky in making verses about Eärendil in the House of Elrond, he's being cheeky about Arwen's grandpa, right? So
That's true.
the idea that he would distance himself from this really emphatically makes all kinds of sense on
That's
several
true.
different levels, right?
Honey, I had nothing to do with it. Yeah.
Aragorn's like, I did nothing. Honey, I swear I didn't tell him anything. I didn't
Yeah.
nothing at all.
I tried to discourage him from saying that, but yeah. Yeah, so okay, so let's go back to the beginning here. Frodo opens his eyes and saw that Bilbo was seated on his stool in a circle of listeners. So we get at the end of the poem, we, the readers, have been carried along on this very long poem, right? Longest poem that we get in the Lord of the Rings. And then, we're being sort of reoriented into the primary narrative, right? Just as Frodo opens his own eyes and sees Bilbo, that sees this sort of prosaic scene, especially after both the scenes of the song that Bilbo was just singing and even the more sort of abstract enchantment that Frodo was experiencing before. We get Bilbo seated on his stool in his circle of listeners, and their pleasure at that. So they're smiling and applauding him. The circle of listeners is kind of interesting to me. Is everyone in the hall listening? I mean, is this a solo performance by Bilbo? I mean, we're told that things are going on around the Hall of Fire. So not everybody's having the same conversation. Not everybody is listening, I think, necessarily to the same story. But the circle of listeners suggests to me that Bilbo is actually only performing for a subset of the people in the Hall of Fire. It's hard for me to imagine.
There's just a group gathered around him.
Yeah.
Just in a corner somewhere. Yeah, or some.
Exactly.
Some part of the room.
It's hard for me to imagine that Gandalf and Elrond aren't listening. I mean, we were talking about how Gandalf and Elrond were probably watching Bilbo and Frodo quite carefully, as this is these are the careful circumstances under which Bilbo is being brought into the presence of the ring again for the first time.
Right.
So they've got to be paying attention to what's going on, I think. But Balancmond, I also do assume that, singing a song that begins Eärendil was a mariner would probably get some attention in the room.
Probably.
Yeah.
Who, what now? What was that?
Right. Yeah.
But, I was just catching something in the text that does tell us other songs were going on, at least before that, right? I mean, Frodo's listening and he's hearing the beauty of the melodies and interwoven words in elven tongues. Bilbo's song isn't in an elven tongue, so we know there are other songs that are happening, and then Bilbo's song starts to come together. So I think you're right that there's subsets and groups and there's different conversations going on.
Yeah.
It's a big room.
It is a big room. Exactly.
And I love that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, I love the idea that it is just a subset, because that makes this epic poem with these very high and lofty ideas. Suddenly it's just an intimate circle of Bilbo's closest friends, probably, listening to the latest thing he's just kind of thrown together.
The ones who have no problem ribbing him at that for that matter.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
It kind of contrasts the high with maybe not the low, but the lower.
Right.
There you go.
Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, it's I mean, the fact that sort of both applause and heckling emerges right afterwards does. I mean, this is not a fancy performance. This is.
You have to wonder what the applauding was like. Was it just your basic little golf clap?
Right.
Very nice, Bilbo. Very nice.
Yeah. I was thinking about that, actually.
Yeah.
The tone of the commentary suggests to me that it's not just polite applause. Like, so this is not Bilbo performing and the whole room listening, and then everybody does like this for a few seconds and stops.
Yeah.
And like
the pro
pretends
forma.
they were listening and then continues their conversation.
Oh yeah, he's done. He's done. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Kind of like you do for like dinner music, right? When like there's a band playing dinner music and no one's paying a lick of attention to them, and then they come to the end of their song and everyone's like, oh, polite applause.
Oh yeah.
Okay, anyway,
right.
Where were we? Like,
what were we saying? Yeah.
I don't think it's that kind of applause, right? I think
I think you're right.
It's enthusiastic. I mean, I don't think they're like jumping up and down and cheering, but I can see like cheerful applause, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Again, leading up to the teasing. And yes, Evil Dr. Cannon, you're right. They did ask for a repeat, right? So it was,
true.
They were interested enough and listening closely enough that they wanted to hear it again.
Or maybe they weren't, which is why they needed to hear it again. I'm sorry, what was that? I missed the whole fourth stanza. I just tuned out.
Well, this is one of the things. So Bilbo's refusal to sing it again right?
Yeah.
And Lindir calls him out on it right away. He's like, "Oh no, it would be too tiring." And Lindir's like, "Oh yeah, whatever." Like that is a transparent excuse. So if Lindir's right, and Bilbo is begging off doing it again, for some reason other than the one that he gives, which I agree with Lindir is unlikely to be the correct one. What was his reason then? Could it be that if he recited it a second time, he would have a more general audience?
Right, more attention. Maybe Elrond would be paying attention. He'd feel a little embarrassed about that.
Exactly. I think Elrond didn't hear it that time. So
that's kind of what
I
I'm
quit
thinking.
Now, I might still.
That's a good thing.
I'm cheeky, but I'm not that cheeky.
Exactly. Exactly.
Or is he even a little nervous that these are elves that might know this story intimately. They might have been alive for some of these events. Does he not want more of those people to hear it because maybe he's gotten something wrong, or they're not going to like his take on it,
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Like, is it? And this, of course, brings us to the question that, and I'm forgetting who it was. There were a couple people over the last few episodes who have been wanting to talk about this question. Within the story, what is Bilbo's motivation? I can agree with the arguments that say, if we look at the poem, you can see a parallel between Eärendil and Frodo's journey. I think that works. But sort of outside the text is that I can't see that as Bilbo himself intending that message to the story.
Right.
Because again, it just doesn't seem to be practical under the circumstances. But then that leaves the question, what did he intend exactly? What was he, knowing that he was going to be reciting this to a bunch of elves at least, or Elrond himself at worst? What was the plan? What was he trying to accomplish in that? So one obvious answer to this, right? And I think that this is the idea that I always had, like, in my earliest readings of this story. I kind of thought that he was, I don't know, sort of sucking up, right? Like, I'm going to tell the story of Eärendil because, like, you'll like that, right? So I'm going to tell the story about, like, how awesome your dad was, right? Because that's going to be cool. And the cheekiness of that choice came in and being like, dude, you think that you can make a story to praise Eärendil, like that your little song about Eärendil is going to be that Elrond's going to be like, oh, I am so moved. My father's honor has greatly increased because of the song that Bilbo the Hobbit sang, right? I always
because better lays have probably been written over the past 6,000 years.
Probably so. So I was that's how I kind of used to read it, but of course, now I feel very confident that that's not the case, right? That it's not to butter up Elrond or to praise Eärendil primarily that he's singing the song. At least that's certainly not what the content of the song itself seems to suggest. If anything, it's about what happens to more. It's like it's using Eärendil as a cautionary tale, which is way cheekier than that other version of this story. What kind of response was he seeking, right? What kind of response was he seeking from the elves? And again, worst case scenario, from Elrond. Mike, that's interesting. Mike says it's an attempt by Bilbo to present the mortal side of Elrond's father. Elrond is just so elfy all the time. And, the elves kind of claim Eärendil in a sense, right? But to be like, hey, like, Eärendil was a mortal too. Let's do the mortal version. That's super cheeky because, of course, Elrond chose the other way. Right? Elrond himself presented between the mortal and elvish part of his father, went the elf direction. And so for Bilbo to be like, hey, let's remember that, you're not just following in your dad's footsteps. You've also turned away from a big part of what your dad was. So let's remember his mortal experience.
Wow. Yeah.
Did you actually use the phrase though, super cheeky? I just want to make sure.
Super cheeky. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Cause that's going to bring up a song when you've got the Prancing Pony podcast guys on, right? It's super cheeky.
No.
I'm just kidding. I'm sorry.
He's got super cheek.
He's a super cheeky. Super cheeky.
Speaking of cheeky, Alan.
Yeah.
The kind of hobbit you don't take home to mama. Anyway.
Oh man.
Hey, look, I'm clearly outclassed. So the only thing I can do is try to be funny from time to time. I am the comic relief tonight. Anyway.
Good company.
It's all good.
You're in good company.
It's all good. Yeah. So yeah, actually, several people are saying they've been waiting for a song to show up. Yeah.
Well,
Corey,
it's gonna happen.
I'm thinking about what you were saying about oh gosh, what was it now? About the effect that this enchantment has on mortals, the effect that these interactions with the divine or with the elves have on mortals. And I'm noticing that the exchange between Bilbo and Lindir is essentially about how different are hobbits and men really.
Yes. Yes.
Because Lindir is saying, "Oh, we can't tell the difference between you," and Bilbo is saying, "No, we're very different." But in reality, is that informing the poem? So the poem is about a man's interaction with fairy.
Yeah.
Is the intent of that exchange to remind us that, hey, hobbits are basically just the other branch of the second born children of Ilúvatar. They're very much like men. The same thing would happen to them too, and the same thing may and probably will happen to them.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, I
doesn't get us any closer to Bilbo's intentions, I guess. But
right. Well, it is a really great point because, of course, the result of Bilbo's question is to get people thinking about hobbits and men together, right? And to draw attention to the fact that from Lindir's perspective, Sean, as you say, they're in one category. They're like, the aftercomers, both of them, right?
Right.
Some of them more after than others.
Sickly.
I know, that's the thing. It's got that same condescending tone as all those names for the mortals.
Yeah. But I think that that's really important. And thinking about it almost would seem, Sean, if I think if I'm following up your comment correctly, it almost points to like the application to Bilbo and Frodo themselves, right?
Right. Yeah.
This is a story about, Eärendil, who was at least kind of mortal, at least in the mortal position, going off to Valinor and what happened to him. And hey, like, remember hobbits and men, we're both in. So this applies to hobbits too.
Right. Yeah.
Understood sort of more abstractly. And then, of course, it turns out the truth is it's an entirely hobbit song. Right. So, in fact, that would seem then to even underscore that. I wonder, do you think Bilbo's question, which we know to be, he's about to reveal the fact that it's a fake question, right? It's a trick question.
That it's
from
all
the
his.
beginning.
Yeah.
Right.
And why is he asking it? I mean, just to give Lindir a hard time, right? I mean, or
quite possibly. It sounds like they've got a history.
It's very likely, but could it also be, in a sense, sort of trying to distract? So, if you sing the poem, one way to get to if you were worried people were going to take you up on the cheekiness and be like, dude, Bilbo, you crossed the line here, man. Like, this is not cool. Okay. If you were worried, if you were Bilbo and you were worried about that, putting this totally different and frankly irrelevant and in fact completely imaginary and non-relevant critical question. So Lindir, here's the important thing. Which parts were mine and which parts were Aragorn's? Don't think about the parts themselves. Just think about which parts were mine.
So it's like, Elrond, I wasn't singing the poem to be cheeky. I just had a bet with Lindir that he couldn't tell the difference between hobbit poetry and man poetry.
This is just kind of an exercise, right?
He's going to bake my Bannocks for a week if I'm right.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But see, I don't know. I mean, that would seem to me like, why would Bilbo, if Bilbo were so afraid of his reception, why would he even do it? I mean, he has the option just not to sing it, right? Or just sing it to Frodo privately or something, or he could have a mortals only concert, later on, behind the backs of the old folks. So
that's great.
But anyway, but it is, so he doesn't do, so I have a hard time fully getting behind the reading that he's like super worried and trying to distract from any criticism that he might get. Even though it does seem to fit. I mean, as JJ's pointing out, that again, Aragorn's kind of like, I'm going to back slowly away from this poem and disassociate myself entirely from this. But of course, then Bilbo immediately associates him, right? So Bilbo claims, right? Bilbo claims. Sorry. Lady Schmedluak just posted a meme with
Statler and Waldorf from the Muppets.
Our two favorite Muppets that are referenced far too often on the show.
As Bilbo and Lindir. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Oh, that's hilarious. Good stuff.
That's brilliant.
But anyway, so like Bilbo is Bilbo. So I guess it's another angle on this question. Is Bilbo just throwing Aragorn under the bus here? I mean, here's Aragorn trying to distance himself from the poem, right? And Bilbo's like, "Oh yeah, Aragorn totally wrote a significant percentage."
That's right.
Can you
Green
tell
Stone?
which
Notice
parts?
the thing on Aragorn's
I had
shirt?
help.
Yeah.
He helped me.
Aragorn's like, "No."
Arwen's right here. Would you shut up, man?
That's right. Yeah. It's. Yeah. So. Yeah, I don't know. One of the things we were talking about a while back before we started looking at the poem was the Elvish reaction to Hobbit poetry, right? Listening to Hobbit poetry. And
right.
We were talking about this in the context of the earlier like when Bilbo says, I need your help with something urgent, right? And he's, talking about like, I've got to polish this up because it's gonna, it's gonna be performed tonight, and like Elrond's gonna hear it. So I need.
I'm giving my paper at Mythmoot in 10 minutes. I need your help to finish it off. Right. Corey's gonna be there. Yeah,
that's right, exactly. So he's. We were talking in that context of what it would mean for the elves to be listening to the hobbits. And on the one hand, it sort of sounds like I'm kind of an amateur and there's these awesome, elvish poets who have been composing poetry for millennia. And, I'm not going to be, it's not truly good enough for Rivendell, right? It's not truly up to par for Rivendell, he says. But we were talking about the elves' potential interest in Bilbo's poetry, even just as a kind of curiosity, right? For them to understand, to hear songs sung from a completely different perspective than they normally do things. And you know what? Bilbo sure gives them that. Bilbo gives them a mortal take on the whole Eärendil story, right? So in that sense, the whole framework of Bilbo's poem is very mortal. If they are interested in a kind of anthropological, from a kind of anthropological perspective, right, in hobbits and hobbit poetry, he has given them a really fascinating little case study, right?
Right.
Because he's not just singing a hobbit song, right? Like, I mean, he could stand up and sing like, ho, 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 to the bottle I go, right? Mm-hmm. And that would doubtless be, maybe feeling a little bit less like Rivendell. But again, I kind of question that too. I mean, if Tra-la-la-lolly is good enough for Rivendell, then so is Ho Ho Ho, right? So,
right.
But that by itself, that is Bilbo singing one of the many Hobbit songs we've already heard in the book, would have given them a glimpse of the Hobbit point of view, right? Think of the walking song, right? Around the corner, there may wait a new road or a secret gate, right? That poem would have given them something about hobbits, how hobbits think, and what Hobbit life is like, which would be very different from their own experiences, walking across the Shire. Here, what Bilbo is doing is giving them a Hobbit angle on elvish stuff, right?
Right.
Here's what it's like living with you, right? Here's what
here's how you look to us. Yeah, here's how your stories look to us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Here's how your stories sound to me. Here's my angle on it. And here I'm coming back to, and I've already forgotten who it was who was saying about Elrond being all elfy.
Right.
Again, you guys will tell the Eärendil story from an elvish point of view, right? Let me take a crack on a really important story for you guys, but I'm going to tell it from a mortal point of view. In a sense, I think we can hear Aragorn doing a similar thing in the Luthien poem, honestly. That is, I think that's one way to take Aragorn's Luthien poem, is that he also is singing like a major elvish moment, right? But he is emphasizing different things from what the elves normally emphasize. Like you'll notice, I mean, think about the way that it's couched in the Silmarillion, right? About how both the beginning and the end of the Beren and Luthien song or the Beren and Luthien chapter of the Silmarillion emphasizes the loss of Luthien, right?
Right.
And how she whom they loved most is now gone. I mean, it's a very elvish perspective.
Oh yeah.
The story, or at least the segment of the story, and Mary points out that he says that the poem is a translation. That's true, but even the fact that he chooses the bit that he chooses still seems to me significant, right? And what he chooses is that moment of her encounter with Beren, and then that kind of final summary nod towards the rest of the story in the final stanzas. So there too, I think that we're getting something which is very much like the mortals. So here's how the story sounds when somebody who is in the Beren perspective, right? Who's connecting with that, even though of course he connects with Luthien too, talking about the descendants of Luthien and all that kind of thing. But still, he knows that he is the parallel to Beren in this story, especially of course with his relationship with Arwen. So in a sense, it is similar. Aragorn's doesn't feel as radical, right, as Bilbo's. That is the sort of mortal perspective thing.
In doing that, is Bilbo sort of reclaiming Eärendil as a hero for mortals and not just for elves? By writing what's certainly the first Hobbit perspective poem on Eärendil, and probably one of few mortal perspective poems on Eärendil.
Right, at least for a long time.
Is he sort of reclaiming? Yeah. Is he sort of reclaiming him for that heritage?
Yeah, which is certainly a cheeky thing to do, right? Like, I'm going to stake my own claim, and your dad belongs to me too, Elrond. He's not just an elf story, right? He's also a mortal story. And with the link, if I'm remembering correctly, when we were looking at this, one of the things we were doing lately was looking at the time when Dunedain is used and when Eärendil is used. We were trying to remember, like, again, just from the Fellowship of the Ring, what do we know? Either about Numenor or about Eärendil. And as I recall, Eärendil is linked explicitly to the Númenóreans in the plot synopsis that Aragorn gives afterwards when he's talking about when he's talking about the plot summary that he gives after reciting the Luthien story. I think, as I recall, he links Eärendil explicitly to the Númenóreans. He cites Eärendil as, the one who
from him came the kings of Númenor, or something like that. Yeah,
exactly. Good. That's just what Mad Violinist was saying too. Aragorn again is also kind of claiming him, right, in that way. And for Bilbo, Sean, thinking about the point you were making about his emphasizing the whole Hobbit human thing, right, in that response, to be like, hey, and although you might not think about it this way, right, you might think about Eärendil as at most a elf and man issue, right? We hobbits, have a perspective on this too, right? Because again, it's still his story is still a story that speaks to our situation. And if Bilbo is smaller, is like a very, very minor league version of this, that's kind of the point, right?
Right.
Eärendil is to Valinor as Bilbo is to Rivendell, because he's a hobbit,
Right.
So, yeah, I like that. And so therefore, okay, so this then leads me to a theory about why Bilbo is asking the trick question. Because one of the effects of the trick question is to make Lindir confront the fact that he can't tell the difference between mortals, right? Lindir ends up acknowledging the gap, right? The gap between the elvish perspective and the mortal perspective, right? We think so differently from you guys that I can't tell the difference. Hobbits, man, what difference does it make, right? I can't tell. And perhaps Bilbo is gently saying, that's the point. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You guys are great and everything, but you don't get this. You don't get the mortal perspective. So I'm going to first sing a song which shows you the mortal perspective even from a distance. And then through my trick question afterwards, I'm going to make you confront the reality of how far away you are from that mortal perspective, essentially. Yeah. Yes. Now, that's a really interesting point.
Sorry.
Okay, so Alan and Sean, one of the kind of games that we play here sometimes when we're looking at the text is trying to forget everything else that we know, like forget the Silmarillion, imagine ourselves as Fellowship of the Rings readers in 1954, right?
Right.
Because it's super easy to forget how little we know.
That's true.
And trying to understand the story and knowing that was the audience that Tolkien was writing for, right? It's kind of interesting to think about it in this way. So Flammifer is pointing out that we know little even about the immortality of the elves thus far. Yes. Well, that's true. I mean, it's true that there have been few explicit references to the fact that elves are immortal, but JJ, that's exactly what I was thinking.
That's what I was thinking as well. Fairy tradition.
I think that if elves turn out to die of old age, we'd have to be told that rather than the other way around. I mean, I think the way, especially if we think back to the first introduction we get to elves in the Fellowship of the Ring is through Sam and his conversation in the Green Dragon, right? I don't think we get anything about elves in chapter 1, but we do get elves from Sam, and the way that he talks about them, Sam thought that he had once seen an elf, right? This idea, we get the idea that they are around, but they are elusive. It seems to invoke a good, and of course the sailing stuff belongs to Mond, absolutely. It seems to, and this is not even counting what we know from The Hobbit, of course, which is perfectly legitimate lore to bring in even in 1954. But even without that, I do think that we've
even had the story of Beren and Luthien by this point in the text,
right?
Yes,
in which Aragorn explicitly talks about Beren being mortal and Luthien
being immortal.
Not, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah, she's immortal. How does he put it? Immortal maiden, elven wise.
Yeah,
in the line of the poem, so it's explicitly mentioned that she's immortal.
Yeah, and Aragorn does emphasize the big deal of the boundary crossing and her choice, right?
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I agree that there haven't been that many explicit references to it. I think that the references that there have been, especially in the Beren and Luthien context there, have been pretty strong ones. And again, there's a large weight of traditional, story underlying it that I think is is likely to kind of weigh in here. So, yeah, exactly, Lincoln. The business about her dying in truth and leaving the world. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. I love the addition of shepherds. To sheep, other sheep no doubt appear different, or to shepherds.
Right.
But mortals have not been our study. We have other business, which, again, thinking of this as like something which Bilbo has essentially maneuvered Lindir into saying, right, is kind of interesting, right?
Yeah.
The acknowledgement that like only a subset of elves care anything about mortals, like pay a lick of attention to mortals at all, right? It's like not an assumption that it's a thing that you do if you're an elf.
No.
And again, that's an interesting confession in the context of this song. Yeah. They have much other business that we know of, right? Baking bannocks, yes. Singing tra-la-la-lolly, right? Maybe they occasionally find a barrel to roll, because I hear elves enjoy that. So,
Apparently so.
There's
Singing all the time. Yep.
But studying mortals is somewhere below like getting a root canal in terms of priorities.
for some of them, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They got to avoid that course because it wasn't required for their major, so it was all good.
Yeah.
It's like Muggle studies.
Studies.
Right.
Exactly. That's it.
Well done.
That's it.
Yeah.
Teaching trees to talk. See, there you go. Another piece of business that the elves said. They got a busy calendar there.
My schedule's full.
My mom
I
told
can't
me I would
study
never be
you.
able to do anything with my tree language major, but I showed her.
That's right.
That's right.
It only took me 7,000 years to pay off my student loans, though.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I've got 10,000 more.
Exactly. Flamifer, I hear the same thing, that it's hard not to think at all about the Bible when shepherds are mentioned explicitly. And it does raise the question, as Flamifer asks, shouldn't the elves be thinking more like shepherds? Like, shouldn't that kind of be their business? Is that, and I don't know if we can necessarily say, I don't know if we can necessarily say that they're wrong to not do, or like they should be shepherds, and if they don't know, if they have not studied mortals, then they should be ashamed of themselves. I don't think that we have enough to know that. I don't think that that's necessarily a requisite thing, but it does raise the question, right? To be a shepherd is like with the, and I agree with Flamifer, almost sort of inescapable biblical freight of that word, of that image. That seems obviously like whether or not it's something everybody should be, it's clearly a good thing to be, right? And so puts Lindir in an interesting position to say, oh yeah, I've not, that's not me. I don't do that. Okay, hey, I have an idea. Let's do a second slide quickly.
Whoa.
All
a
right.
second slide.
Okay.
I feel like we're in like rarefied air.
This is. It's 2 slides is pretty ambitious, but I wanted to get to the end of this conversation if we could. I won't argue with you, said Bilbo. I am sleepy after so much music and singing. I'll leave you to guess if you want to. If you want to.
I'm still
Notice
not
the
telling
barb
you.
there
Yeah.
at the end. If you have time in your busy business calendar, to guess, you can do that. Which, by the way, like Bilbo just like eviscerates Lindy.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like Bilbo's comebacks are like, absolutely top every single time. Lindir is losing this insult competition.
Yes, he is.
Okay, he got up and came towards Frodo. Well, that's over, he said in a low voice. It went off better than I expected. I don't often get asked for a second hearing. What did you think of it? I am not going to try and guess, said Frodo, smiling. You needn't, said Bilbo. As a matter of fact, it was all mine. Except that Aragorn insisted on my putting in a green stone. He seemed to think it was important. I don't know why. Otherwise, he obviously thought the whole thing rather above my head, and said that if I had the cheek to make verses about Eärendil in the House of Elrond, it was my affair. I suppose he was right. I don't know, said Frodo. It seemed to me to fit somehow, though I can't explain. I was half asleep when you began, and it seemed to follow on from something that I was dreaming about. I didn't understand that it was really you speaking until near the end. Okay. It went off better than I expected, he said. So whatever, now, that could be sort of, you know, false humility on Bilbo's part, but this doesn't feel like it sounds like somebody who's genuinely relieved.
Yeah. Like, hey, they actually clapped, so yeah,
right,
that's better than they sometimes do.
That was a win. And so yeah, while they're still asking for more, I'm gonna bow out. So thinking again back to the question of what was Bilbo's intention, right? What response was Bilbo going for? Mm-hmm. It went off better than I expected is an interesting comment, right? So
yeah, it is,
whatever
actually.
he was expecting them not to like it, them not to get it, you know?
He recites a lot of stuff. Maybe he's used to kind of being, you know, gonged off the show and just having to.
right.
Like, maybe this is the highest subject that he's treated in a Hobbit style, and maybe his Hobbit style poetry doesn't usually.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe like you said, you know, there was real applause this time, and maybe a lot of the time it really is just kind of polite.
Right.
Golf
that
clap.
Was lovely.
I don't know if I believe that though. I
know.
I'm
just
the elves
bouncing
probably
some ideas around.
Yeah. No, I mean it's a possibility, but I don't know. I tend to feel like the elves probably do appreciate Bilbo's poetry.
Yeah. Well, just like if you go to France and you try to speak French, a few of the French people will appreciate your pathetic attempts to do so. Most of them will mock you and laugh at you like Windir.
Yeah.
But some of them will be like, you know what? Good job, American. Yeah. You tried.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a little bit of that here. Like, okay, Bilbo, you know what? Not bad for a mortal, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ray Burns, is Elrond looking? No, begins clapping. That's great stuff. Oh, man.
Yeah. Belongsman was asking, were the elves clapping nervously and looking at Elrond?
Right, exactly. Where is he?
Yeah, exactly.
Head on a swivel, man. Head on a swivel. All right.
Yeah. But I mean, no, I think it does seem likely that Bilbo knows that he was taking a risk, right? That he was he was giving a immortal perspective on this really important story and really did not, as I think Mike was saying, genuinely didn't know how they would respond to that. I don't think he was expecting to have tomatoes chucked at his head, you know, but
no.
Right.
But they could have responded with a kind of stunned silence, you know, like
how
Bilbo,
dare
do
he?
you know
You talked about who?
Really just do that.
Right.
Should you maybe bone up on this story a little more before you tell it? I mean, maybe they just be puzzled, right? Or maybe they would just be like, yeah, that's interesting, but that's wrong. That's just not it. You know, that
actually this is how it happened.
Right. Fake news.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to imagine the elves being... I mean, I'm sure that even if they didn't understand it, I'm sure that even if they were offended by it, they would probably be like sufficiently understanding of Bilbo himself that they would, you know, I mean, again, I don't see them like reacting. I don't see them kicking him out the house or anything. You know, it's the sidewalk for you, Bilbo. That's
you got to go home, pal. Yeah.
That's it.
That's right.
Your welcome is revoked. But
no more food for you, Bilbo. No more food.
Yeah.
As Mad Violinist says, when Thingol is in your family tree, nervousness might be in order. Yeah, that's true.
Aragorn would do well to remember that about him.
Yes. Yeah. But anyway, yeah. So I don't think he would expect that kind of a negative reaction, but puzzlement, confusion, you know, a kind of polite applause, which suggested that they didn't get it and were just being polite, right? But instead, they seem to be genuinely interested, you know, as reflected in their desire to hear it again. So yeah, I definitely think that would have been one of the things that he was concerned about. That, especially since he immediately says, "I don't often get asked for a second hearing," right? And that seems to suggest not just appreciation, but like genuine interest. Like, I would like to understand
Right.
this better. I would like to hear it again. And I think he's going to sing it again, probably another time, but
Sure.
you know, he doesn't do it then. Yeah. So Aragorn insisting on his putting in a green stone, which is a very minor reference, right? And on his breast in emerald is like apparently the one line which Aragorn influenced
Right.
in this. And of course, as we noticed when we saw the history of the poem, the emerald is one of the constants, actually. Ironically, that would have been one of the few things that Aragorn wouldn't have had to insist upon, because it's one of the things that's in every version of the poem. Not always the same way.
Right,
I think his sword is an emerald in errantry, and in the second version, he's got an emerald somewhere else in his helm, maybe.
Yeah.
And then the emerald is on his breast in the Eärendil poem. So it kind of shifts around. Of course, the only line that's identical in all three versions of the poem is his scabbard of Chalcedony is the only line that's exactly the same in all the poems. So not quite as constant as the Chalcedony, but the emerald is always involved.
Right.
And yet, so despite the fact that the emerald was a guarantee, we're told that Aragorn had to insist on it.
Which does make it interesting when you read in Adventures of Tom Bombadil that Errantry was another poem by Bilbo.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah.
Yeah. So, of course, it's especially interesting that Aragorn is insisting on his putting in the green stone. Like, make sure you mention me, right? Make sure you mention the elf stone, right?
Yeah.
On the one hand, I want to distance myself from this poem, but on the other hand, I want to make sure I get an Easter egg in there.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. ELESSAR.
That's right.
2 S's. Don't forget that.
Right.
Yeah. That is really interesting to me. Like, is this Aragorn kind of staking his claim in a sense of being not claim to the poem, but claim in Eärendil?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, showing that, because the fact that he, that Elrond is going to be bearing the Elfstone, right, the LSR, on his breast, is, then linking him directly back to Eärendil. So we want to make sure we emphasize that as a very understated way of saying basically exactly what Aragorn said in prose after the Luthien poem about how Eärendil was the father of the kings of Númenor, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So is this Aragorn just trying to make sure that everybody in the room is reminded that he's of that lineage? Not that anybody's forgotten, but
yeah, I can't imagine anyone would forget, which is one of the things that makes it weird, right? I mean, it's not, there doesn't seem like a plot-based reason in that way, right? Like to remind folks. Is it because, in the context of when Bilbo mentions it, right? Aragorn insisted on my putting in a green stone. He seemed to think it important. I don't know why. Otherwise, he obviously thought the whole thing rather above my head. Right. So Bilbo associate, he says, okay, the whole thing is above your head. I'm not going to touch this with the 10-foot pole, except it's super important that you add the green stone, right? The green stone can't be left out.
Right.
So if this is the one thing, because the thing is, again, what I just can't get around is that one way or the other, whether you see it as the, forefather of the Númenóreans element, or whether you see it as the personal, like, I am Elessar and that's the green stone, and so I totally deserve to be in this. Whether it's the lineage or whether it's himself, the effect in both cases is to give him a kind of stake in this poem. If Bilbo's message in the poem is, this is the mortal perspective on this, and it's relevant to hobbits, again, Sean, as you were talking about before, then by putting in the green stone, through that one line, Aragorn is basically saying, like, and men, right? It's...
I co-sign this whole poem, sort of.
Exactly.
Despite what I'm saying out loud. But.
Yes, exactly. I mean, that's why I can't, it seems to kind of stand on its head, right? If you're going to do this, which you shouldn't, then you should put in a green stone, right? So as to kind of loop me in, but in a really low key kind of way, in which I can still have deniability.
Right.
Yeah, as JJ says, the words of this ranger stand on their heads, which it does kind of seem, really.
A little bit. In 5 years. We need to return to the Greenstone in 5 years when we reach Galadriel's gifts. That may be optimistic, Ambrosius.
Right.
That may be optimistic.
I don't know. That's in this book, man. It's only taken us...
That's true.
This is session number 29, I think, on this chapter. So we've only been discussing this chapter, therefore, for like 7 to 8 months. So at that rate, we should get to Lothlorien.
Like 3 years.
Yeah, a good 3 years.
And that's not a joke. No, that's really that's about right.
That's probably it.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So
making us look like Usain Bolt here. I mean, we are just
exactly.
Really flying through this stuff.
Exactly.
And I thought we were going slow, taking 5 episodes. Anyway.
Yeah.
I can't decide. I think I have to think about this more, because I'm not sure I have a good reading. I'd really appreciate other people's thoughts, and if anyone has, anyone who's listening asynchronously has ideas, I hope you can post them to our discussion board, because I don't feel like I have a good, clear reading for what's going on with Aragorn here, based on, of course, we don't have a first-hand account, right? This is Bilbo's explanation to Frodo, so we're a couple removes from what Aragorn himself actually was thinking or doing. But if it weren't for the business about the green stone, it would make perfect sense. Like, if all we had was, he obviously thought the whole thing rather above my head, etc., then that I would get that, right? I wouldn't feel like there's any trouble.
Right.
But to say that and then be like, oh, P.S., green stone, make sure that's in there. Mm-hmm. Am I going too far to think about it? I mean, is my premise that it's in some way self-referential on Aragorn's part? Is that going too far? We haven't had it yet. I mean, certainly at this point in the story, there's no reason to associate that with Aragorn. Bilbo doesn't associate it with Aragorn, right?
No, clearly.
He admits he doesn't have any idea why the green stone was important, right? It's only in retrospect that we can begin to understand what was important about it to Aragorn. So Ambrosius Aurelianus was asking, does Aragorn already have a green stone, or does he only get one from Galadriel later? Because it would make more sense if he already had one. No, I don't think so. But I do suspect he knows the name that is foretold for him.
Right.
So I think that he knows that there is a green stone in his future already. Arden Cran is reminding us of the elf stone, of course, left on the bridge by Glorfindel, which
right.
Yeah.
would have to be the immediate reference that we, again, 1954, we're in this chapter, first time reading the book, that has to be the only thing that we
connect it back
would
to
connect
him.
to it,
Yeah.
right? A barrel, an elf stone. And so therefore it's significant because it's a green stone, which is an elf stone, which is connected with the power of elves, as we see Glorfindel leaving. He calls it a token on the bridge. Aragorn seems to suggest that it has some power to discomfit the Black Riders, right? When it's left on the bridge like that, like to secure the bridge in a sense. And so Aragorn thinks it's important for us to associate Eärendil with that. It's weird though, because if he's thinking of the Elfstone, if Aragorn is thinking of the barrel, then what he's doing is kind of making Eärendil more elfy. In insisting on the adding of a green stone, which would seem to be going against Bilbo's motivations. And so if that were the case, Aragorn would be kind of, I don't know what, soft pedaling the whole mortal angle thing, right? Let's at least throw the elf nature a bone here, right, in the description, and not rule that out entirely.
Are we maybe supposed to view this the way Bilbo does? Bilbo says he seemed to think it important. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Right? We aren't supposed to know why yet. We'll figure it out later. It's a textual ruin that we will eventually get to see the rest of.
Yeah.
But for now, we're not worried about it. We're just okay. Well, then apparently a green stone's important. Maybe we'll find out later why that is.
Yes.
I mean, we're not supposed to go back to tie this to the green stone on the bridge, perhaps.
Probably not. Again, I'm just trying to think of what kind of associations we could be plausible to have.
Right.
There.
Or is the fact that Bilbo doesn't understand the significance of the green stone in the poem meant to be sort of ironic to us, the reader, say, oh, but we remember a green stone from just the last chapter, or the previous chapter.
Right.
From about 5 months ago.
Yeah. It's ever so long. I barely remember it now, but
And so is Bilbo's lack of knowledge of the green stone meant to remind us that we actually do have knowledge of the green stone, and then to more explicitly to kind of lead us to the barrel that Glorfindel left at the bridge?
Yeah, it could. JJ is sort of summarizing the Elfstone version of this as it's important to remember, as mortal as Eärendil is, there was still some elfiness too. And Fourth Dauntless, I agree with you. There can't be a literal connection. Like, that is, it's not that the green stone that Aragorn is going to be wearing on his breast is the same one as Eärendil. That's not the case.
Here, catch.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it got a little bit tarnished in re-entry, but here it is.
Yeah.
We found this meteor. We went to the meteorite site, and there was a green stone. No, it's not. It doesn't tie him to Eärendil in the way that, like, his ring ties him to Beren, for instance.
Right. Symbolic.
A more symbolic parallel, really. Okay. Xenia, you're absolutely right. Xenia's recalling Michael Drout's dictum about the story tending to be told by the person with the least knowledge. So Bilbo's expression of ignorance here certainly fits in there and gives us a glimpse of... even if the only thing that we get is that there is a significance and we don't know it because Bilbo doesn't know it, right? Even if the only thing that happens is we're left wondering, why are green stones important? What's the significance of the emerald? Even if merely wondering about that is the result, that would seem to be an important result. Okay. Last thing here, looking at Frodo's comment. It seemed to me to fit somehow, though I can't explain. I was half asleep when you began, but it seemed to follow on from something that I was dreaming about. I'm remembering back to what Eye for Detail was saying in the first question that we were reading earlier on, about the apparent link between those the seas sighing on the shores, right? And then the segue into Eärendil. It seemed to me to fit somehow. Is interesting. Is this Frodo responding? Because no, he's not saying that he responded to it, right? He's not describing his own resonance with it. He's describing the way that it fit together with the Elvish song that came before, right? It seemed to follow on from something that I was dreaming about, because of being under the influence of Elvish song, as we saw before. He didn't hear the difference. So this is really interesting, right? If Bilbo's poem is almost a kind of a shock piece, right? Let me do this thing, this familiar song to you, one of your great songs, from a completely shockingly different perspective, right? And then Frodo says, yeah, I thought actually it fit really. It seemed to just follow right along from what the elves were singing. That would suggest that either Frodo wasn't paying much attention to the song and was like, I was in oceans and then you were saying mariners, and I was like, yeah, I can roll with it.
I'm tracking.
I'm there.
Yeah.
Totally track it. Or I hope more likely that basically Frodo, who of course can tell sheep apart and that kind of thing, being a sheep, he can see sort of the whole picture. Perhaps in a sense here is getting something that Bilbo was trying to get at, right? Whereas we've been emphasizing how Bilbo seems to be trying to say to the elves, hey, step outside your songs and think about this from the mortal perspective, right? Think about what it is like for us. Frodo is sort of one step further back, hearing both, hearing the elves sing and hearing Bilbo sing. So Frodo is in the audience for both performances of like the battles of the bands there, right? And he is able to give a perspective on how the two of them go together. And he says, hey, you know what? Like, I thought that was great, actually. First, I was getting this elvish perspective on, the seas at the margins of the world and stuff. And then I was getting you on this mortal perspective through the Eärendil story. And, like those two really went together. Those two fit in an important way. Of course, exactly as Eärendil himself is mortal and elf combined together, right? So maybe Frodo, perhaps alone in the room, or one of the very few in the room, who is able to hear that from those two perspectives and say, rather than taking either half of it just for granted, right? Bilbo singing from the mortal perspective, the elves singing from the elvish perspective, that Frodo can really see how the elf and the mortal sides kind of merge together, as of course we have to an extent in Elrond, of course, in the sense that he's half elven, but he's half elven technically, but he's on the elf side, right? I mean, he's chosen the elf side. Eärendil is really the one who, he does choose the elf side, but Eärendil's more sort of the more pure meeting of the elvish and the human together, right? Whereas again, Elrond has, been more wholly adopted by the elvish side and has been living the elvish life now for thousands of years. Yeah.
Isn't it interesting that Frodo sees the same lack of distinction between Bilbo's song and the elvish song that came before? So it's like he can't tell the difference between the elvish song and Bilbo's song, in the same way that Lindir can't tell the difference between Bilbo's lines and Aragorn's lines.
Yeah.
Is Frodo seeing a similarity or a cohesion between Bilbo and the elves?
It seems like it, I think, in a sense that just as Bilbo's question prompts Lindir to like confess how distant he is from the mortal side of things, Frodo's observation would seem to I don't know if correct Bilbo is exactly. I mean, if Bilbo is basically being kind of all in your face about the mortal side of things, right, with this song, and Frodo is basically saying, yeah, you know what? Actually, from the outside, they really went together really well, right? That really worked. That was really. You were just saying that you thought it was inappropriate, or Aragorn was telling you it was inappropriate, and I, honestly, it seemed really completely appropriate, that those things do really fit together in a really important way. They're not the same, right? But maybe they do, to go back to the earlier metaphor, they fit together not like two sheep fit together, but they fit together like sheep and shepherds, right? Sheep and shepherds fit together. They are different, but they make a harmonious, grouping, right? And, that maybe there's some sense of that kind of came through to Frodo. Yeah. Fourth Dauntless is saying that it's just the experience of one single song bubbling up from the surrounding musical themes has some relevance, especially given the nature of Frodo's dream. Perhaps this is more evidence that Frodo is sensitive to the music. That's really interesting. That the particular kind of dream experience that Frodo was having before Bilbo's song began, and the way that is described, kind of bubbling up out of that dreaming experience that he was having. It's possible that when Frodo says it seemed to follow on from something that I was dreaming about, he isn't just referring to the elvish music that came before, that there was in fact something else that was being kind of transmitted to Frodo through that experience, and that is what really kind of fit together. Possibly. Ardent Crayon, that would be a really thinking about. So Ardent Crayon is thinking about both Frodo's trance-like experience of the elven music on the one hand, and the sort of delusional state that he's in under the influence of the Morgul blade, like the grayness and the shadows that that come across his vision, and his being able to see the riders and see his friends less and less. That would be a really interesting comparison to me, Ardent Crayon, actually, to be looking at the kind of alternative state, right? The alternative mental and spiritual state that Frodo gets in, influenced by evil, right? Influenced by the Morgul weapon, influenced by the ring. And to compare that to enchantment, right? To examples of enchantment when people are being kind of taken out of themselves by elvish music. I think that's very. I think that would be there's a lot more to do there. That would be a really good moot paper, by the way. Somebody wanted to do a little study on that and talk about some passages there. That would be a really good moot discussion topic. Cool. All right. We're going to stop there because it's late. And surprise, surprise, I started late and I'm running late. But so we're gonna stop our textual discussion there, and we're gonna do field trip stuff. Normally, this is when I say goodbye to the folks on Twitter, but I didn't even start the Twitter stream tonight because it was too much. This is already enough complexity, I think.
All right, so I got to get into. I got to launch the game. I mean, I've got the launcher up, but you need me to go ahead and.
Okay, yeah. So we're gonna go in. So we're in Bree. Where's your? So Alan
I don't
has a
know.
character, but,
I'm in Bree. I'm sure.
Sean does not. So Sean's gonna be following along on Twitter, or on Twitch rather.
Right. Yep.
Said Twitter. Okay.
I'm joining via Palantir. That's my.
There you go.
That's my official line.
That's right.
Hi guys.
Excuse me.
Okay. Hey, Valerie.
All right. Why is it not?
Good evening, everybody. This is a fun discussion.
What? Why is it not running?
It's walking like 0 card.
It told me it was not optimized for my Mac. but I'm not running the new 64-bit OS.
Dun, dun, dun.
Hold on. Seriously, nothing?
Yeah, I'll tell you what. Alan, while you try to get that, I know you've seen some of the early things. Why don't we we'll do a quick tour of the Prancing Pony for Sean?
Okay.
Ooh, sounds great.
And
In the meantime, I'll keep trying to launch. I have, of course, many times.
Yeah. Okay, so
if I need to, I can go back upstairs to my other computer and get in that way, but I'll have to, I don't have Discord on that computer. Would I? Yeah, that'll be a problem.
I use it on my phone. If you have the app on your phone, that's what I use.
What the heck? Why is it not launching? It just goes blank. I get nothing. All right. This is bad. Yeah, I did patch actually. In fact, I just ran the launcher. The launcher works, but then the game just disappears.
We're trapped in here.
Well, worst case, you could always just join us on Twitch too, if.
I'm trying to see if I can find.
Okay, so let's let's just go around the corner to the Prancing Pony.
Yeah, sounds good. So yeah, no, that was literally a hall of fire. Everybody was getting burned and roasted.
So we're in Bree right now.
We're in Bree right now. So the place where we were there is the lecture hall that the game developers kindly made for me when I started exploring the Lord of the Rings. So that room in the game is basically the closest thing Signum University has to a campus. It's basically our campus.
Right across from the crazy cat lady's house.
Exactly, right across from which is totally appropriate.
You've met professors,
one of the director of higher education with the Department of Education in the state of New Hampshire dared me to show the lecture hall to our evaluators when we were up for state approval. Just to say, like, I'll give you a campus tour and then take them into the game. I did not end up taking him up on that dare, but...
nuts.
Anyway, okay. So, all right. So, Sean, this is one of the main streets of Bree. That's the west gate down there that they came in the first time. And Harry Goatleaf is hanging around down there. We're going to go up the hill. So the Prancing Pony is straight on down this road up at the highest point in Bree here. I've always really liked the architecture in Bree. They do a really good job of capturing. This is an old human style of architecture. A lot of these stone walls are the old stone walls. You can see I've done a lot of archaeological investigation around here, and you can see there's the classic style of the old Arnorian ruins that you still find in this region from the old days. But in Bree, you can still see some of those because, of course, this crossroads was right at a really important spot during the times of the Arnorian Civil War. But you can also still see all the pre-Numenorian stuff in Bree. And the Prancing Pony here is pure human architecture pre-Arnor, pre-Numenorian incursion here.
It's got half timber style with plaster walls and brick base on that.
Exactly.
Okay.
While you're silent, I'll just tell you we're out of luck here. I cannot get it to launch. I can't even get that error message about not being optimized anymore. It just simply won't launch. And unfortunately, I can't. The upstairs computer hasn't been patched because I didn't think I'd have to do it from up there.
Right.
So if I went up there, by the time it's updated, we're done. So Durthal will have to we'll have to wait.
Okay. So well, we can still show you some things on screen.
Yeah. I'd love to.
Cool.
Okay. So let's see. Okay, so we go into the Prancing Pony. So let's see. I think there's some people that we can meet out here.
This is a regularly scheduled music concert by the Musica Bendito.
Right. Yeah. So we got some music going on here.
Oh yeah. Happy Dia de los Muertos.
That's right.
Oh, cool.
And I think is Is Bob out here? Is he
Uh,
inside?
Knob is
He's-
over
he's
here to the left, to the right.
oh yes.
Which side? He's on the other side?
He's coming by the band.
Oh, he's coming. Oh,
Yeah,
that's right. He walks around. I forgot.
He walks around. Yeah, that's
So
what
he's
it
not
was.
just hanging out by
Oh,
the
there,
horses.
there he is. There's Knob.
Thought
He's
he's
not
getting
right
his
there.
feet run off. He's a busy guy, this guy.
Right. There's Knob carrying his bucket. Okay. All right. Okay. So
You
then
know,
we
Corey,
go-
I'm going to go ahead.
Hey,
I'm going to try one more thing. I'm going to go ahead and log out, reboot. I know that I'll have to find the link again to get into the GoToWebinar, but I'll be right back, and I'll log into Discord as well and see if I can get into the game.
Okay.
Okay.
I will try to
Good
keep an
luck.
eye on you there.
All right, thanks, man. Be back.
Okay. All right. So here's the inside of the Prancing Pony. We
So
get
this
sign
is the
up here.
common room, huh?
This is the common room over there. It's a large common room. We've got
Yeah.
Butterbur here behind the counter. We've got dwarves here, right? Patron and traveling dwarf standing around. So we've got a fairly diverse crowd of men and dwarves. There are more hobbits here than we see in the book. Like
Oh, and the
minstrel over here.
Ale Association is doing their rush week, so there's drinking challenges over here.
There's drinking challenges going on.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
harvest.
it's
Fest.
what could
pub
go
run.
wrong?
You gotta pub run. You got to down 6 and go to the next station.
Right.
Oh, what could go wrong indeed?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So this is a it's a lovely room. It's so one of the general effects that I find in Lotro, one of the things that's pretty universal, is that almost everything is bigger in the game than it's described in the book. And they do this very consciously, and I generally agree with the with their choice. The principle that, as they've described it to me, is that basically if you try to make everything exactly realistically proportioned as it's described in the book, it will end up looking really well, like underwhelming when you get there in the game.
Right.
So one of the examples, one of the sort of most dramatic examples of this is the Stone of Erech. So the Stone of Erech, as it's described in the book, and it's pretty clear how large it is, and it's not that big. It's about 6 feet across, right? And it's half buried in the ground. And you know, as Chris Pearson, one of the lead developers, was telling me about that when we were talking, when they first introduced that area of Gondor, he said basically if you put in the game the Stone of Erech exactly as it's described, you're going to walk up to it and it's going to look like a coffee table. Basically, it's going to be about the size of a coffee table. You won't even be able to see it from like 10 feet away. Like the grass will be taller than it, right? So, and that would be, you know, it doesn't convey the sense of the significance of that spot, right? Especially like with the Stone of Erech being a really classic example, right? Of one of those places where you go and it's like the kind of impact that it has, that sense of foreboding, of ominousness that's attached to it, right? It just
It feels like a powerful spot. It's imposing.
Exactly. They wanted to be true, not to that. So they chose to deviate from the actual description in the book in order to try to create the kind of effect that is described in the book. So the Stone of Erech is like 25 feet across. It's absolutely enormous. Like when you stand next to it, it's like 20 feet tall.
Cool.
But it looks really cool from a distance. Like you see it on the hilltop, and it has this really striking. It looks so alien, right? This perfect globe.
It's like one of the monoliths from 2001 or something.
Yeah.
Yes,
Round, except round.
Except round. Yeah.
It's a perfect 3 in diameter. No, But yeah, it's very similar to like how they'll do it with movies. There's so many behind-the-scenes footage you get about people wanting to film things in historic locations, and they get to the historic location, they go, "Oh, this is just kind of lame," and boy, these people were short, and this table's boring, and then they say, "Okay, forget it. We're going to build a set." And that's what happens, like
Right.
9 times out of 10.
Yeah. So I mean, I say that because so like the common room of the Prancing Pony here, right? This seems to me pretty obviously much bigger than it would have been in the book. I mean, like the way that Frodo, like when Frodo stands up and addresses the company. I mean, if you imagine like, you know, Frodo and Pippin and Sam seated at like this table over here, right? If Frodo were to stand up and address the company, even before he starts singing, I mean, like the people on the far side of this room that we're seeing here would barely even be able to hear, you know, they wouldn't be able to see him, and they wouldn't even be able to hear that he was talking, right? So it seems pretty clear that the common room was a much more sort of small, more communal gathering spot than this is. And yet I like the effect of this, the sense of this feels like a potential gathering place for like, you know, much of the town. Right. You know, it should have that kind of feeling, I think. And yet they still manage with the pillars and sort of the low ceilings and the bench tables to create that kind of sort of, you know, and you can see people certainly, you know, standing on tables and singing songs. And
it still feels cozy.
Yeah, it does feel cozy. It's just pretty big. So
it's more of a community center.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
It's community cozy. Just
exactly.
Not cozy.
Yeah.
Fellowship Hall, Women's Institute thing.
All right, sorry, I'm bringing Alan back in here after his reboot, and we'll see. No luck. Okay, sorry.
Oh,
That's unfortunate.
good gravy. Oh, you guys don't have to mount up. I just mounted up because that's what I automatically do, and we're not going anywhere for some reason.
We can't hear Alan, by the way.
Okay, right. Yeah, you can't hear Alan. That's okay. So Alan said it didn't work. So, but he's coming back into Discord. Yes.
In the lore hall. There we go.
fixed that.
Sorry,
Yeah,
folks. Not
there
gonna
we
be
go.
able to
Nope.
join in.
That was because when you came back into Discord,
Yeah,
you got
unfortunate.
remuted.
Yeah.
Blame Mac and blame Standing Stone for not working with Mac. Apparently. All right.
They have a wine client for
Yeah.
local.
All right, let me just
it's a
get
long
back
story
to-
on that. By
Yeah.
the way, here's a shot of the Stone of Arakan game. If you see on the Twitch channel.
Ooh,
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Space rock.
That is imposing.
It's
Yeah.
very imposing. Again, you can see the person standing next to it for scale.
Yeah,
so on the one
scale,
hand, it's kind
man.
of ridiculous, and yet, again, like when you see that from I mean, you can see this from like a mile away, and it's just such a cool effect.
That
I
would
mean,
be.
it really does look like something dropped in by aliens, which I think is exactly the effect that it should have. Like
That's
just
right.
Absolutely.
Just
right.
how people thought of it. Okay,
It-
so it's
It looks like if you broke a vow on this stone, you'd really be in trouble.
absolutely. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so let's head over to Rivendell briefly so we can see the House of Elrond. I think we can probably. Let's see, Kieran, are you just going to summon me?
I can port you there.
Okay, let's do that.
I can port other people who can't get there on their own.
Yes, if there's anybody who is here with us in game who needs a port, you can.
Yeah, I can do the same.
great.
I'll stand over here by this the signpost. Anyone who wants to be fellowed and ported by me, come stand by the signpost.
And I'm over by Erling, by the fountain.
Okay, that's right. So I got to come near you, right? So you can port me. Okay.
Right. Anyone else? Any more takers?
Getting people in the
Okay.
village.
Okay. All right.
All right, I got 2. Anyone else? Last call.
I've got 2, 3. All right. Looks like we're off.
Leaving for Rivendell.
All right.
When you get the little clicky thing, click on the little thingy.
Frilla, you're already in a fellowship. I can't invite you.
I got her.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All aboard.
Okay.
Heading to Rivendell by ways of Ostgaruth, Trollshaws, and the last homely house.
Okay. So this is the main bridge into Rivendell. That's the last homely house that we see across the way there. One of the things that I love most, Sean, about the representation of this is if you look at the right beneath the sort of central tower of the house there, this little like roof cupola, it looks like an open book.
Oh wow, yeah.
As if it's like the house of story, right?
This is the lore house, yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
I really love that.
That is super cool.
That little detail there. This is okay. This is the main bridge of Rivendell that the dwarves were uncomfortable going across. This bridge, by the way, if it's to scale, makes the business about don't dip your beard in the foam, father, even funnier, actually, because it would be a joke on the length of the dwarves' beards, right? Like,
right.
You know, we're assuming that you dwarves
They got the whole
all have
ZZ Top
17-foot
action going on there.
Exactly. You all have 17-foot beards.
Right.
So
Because everybody's crazy about a sharp-dressed dwarf, right, Sean?
That's right. That's right.
It's less ZZ Top, more Dr. Seuss at that point.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
They unroll like red carpets. Good one.
exactly. Okay, so let's see if Narnian can make it across the bridges without falling off. There are a lot of low railing bridges, narrow bridges with low railings that I either run off
Railing
of,
kill.
like
Yeah.
that one, or this one, where you can't escape it once you get on it, but I'll come up here on horseback and just miss it and just go straight off into the river. Such that I've, in my Lotro streams, have now utilized it as a verb. You know, say I hope I don't Rivendell this bridge.
Oh goodness, that's awesome.
Because that's
Elves don't care much for OSHA safety standards.
pretty characteristic.
No railings, no
So
nothing.
by the way, okay, so quiz guys, who's the statue? Out in front, we have a statue of.
I can't quite see. Let me open up my browser window a little bit more. Oh, that's going to be
Is that
Gil-galad.
Yeah.
Gil-galad.
With the stars.
That's
Spear
eyeglass.
and the stars on his shield. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then we have this one's pretty easy. Hard to see her clearly. There we go.
Oh well.
Oh well, she's dancing, so
Yeah, the dancing girl. Yeah, that's
J-Lo.
Luthian. Yeah.
Sorry. Hey, you know what? I got it.
Nicki Minaj. Welcome to this century. Come on.
And
now does anyone know what kind of flowers those are around the statue of Luthien? Or I guess
Oh,
all over the
Celebrimbor. Celebrimbor.
yes,
Oh, wow.
Celebrimbor with his hammer, his jeweler's hammer, and his ring
Yep.
that he's holding up. Yes.
somebody take those things away from him, please.
Seriously, can we please
Looks like-
just... So we should vandalize that statue.
Yeah.
I
A little
never
late
noticed
for
this
that at
before,
this
but his
juncture.
Yeah.
facial expression is really, he looks like kind of, does not look happy in this picture.
Unsatisfied.
Yeah.
Well, he is Feanor's grandson.
That is true. He heard about what we said about his grandfather.
That's right.
Oh, the Prancing Pony guys are coming tonight. Great.
Oh, those guys.
Yeah.
I disavowed him, guys. I disavowed him.
Okay.
Yeah, fine, but then you went and made the rings, man.
Well, you know, anybody can make a mistake.
You went and served Sauron.
This architecture is really interesting. I mean,
That's
for
one
me,
thing I
Yeah.
love about the game.
This is the first Elvish architecture I'm seeing in this game.
Really?
It's
Well, because I've never played before.
It's a pretty
Right.
good example. And it's one of the things that I really love. You know, we do a lot of looking at architecture in these field trips, and
A lot.
a lot.
Just a bit.
A lot.
A little bit.
Not so you'd notice.
This is where I should mention what I do for a day job. I actually am an architectural photographer.
Oh, there
So for me, I notice these things in game a lot when I'm not just trying to, you know, level up or get the next crafting tier. But yeah, it's pretty fascinating, and I imagine myself kind of thinking, well, see, how would I shoot this place?
Right.
This one's tough. It's too tall.
Yeah, this one is too tall, and it's open to the sky too. So it's you get straight up to the stars, and this, of course, is Elbereth.
Of course.
Or at least that's what we've always sort of assumed. When I first came in, I remember when I first entered this building, I'm like, is that Luthien? Like with the hair, right? I mean, all the hair.
Right.
Like, it's like Luthien in her cloak of hair.
Magic
but then
hair.
I was like, no, I think it's gotta be Elbereth.
Yeah, it's got to be. This is more like this isn't a statue. This is more like a shrine. It's almost it's got some religious significance almost.
A lot of Marian influence on that.
Yes.
Yeah, true.
Exactly.
And she is the one that they revere more than any other. So yeah.
And I love the fact that, little camera shift there. I love the fact that she, you can see her ears, right? Because it's the hearing. It's all about the hearing with Elbereth, right?
Oh,
yeah.
Out there,
Right.
And even the the sort of the like her, her sort of sideburns, right, come down, but trace the line back up to her.
Those are like anime
her ears.
dealies. It's a thing.
Yeah.
Don't let her hear you say
Anime
that.
hair dealies.
Don't let her hear you say that.
That's right. And that's pretty tough.
Anime's cool.
Not letting her hear you say things.
I know. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Can we see the detail on the cloak? The little, I don't know what it's called, but
her cloak?
Yeah,
Mantle.
the mantle. That's the word I'm
Yeah.
looking for.
I don't see. Looking around from the side, I don't think it's just mostly.
It's
Very
just designed.
faded.
On the
Well, it is open to the elements. It might have worn away.
Yeah.
It's true.
Whoa.
I was just curious if we might see a star pattern or something there.
Right.
Is this a fountain? I don't think I've noticed this. Is this supposed
Nice
to be
hat.
a pool or a fountain?
That's definitely
No, it's marble. Okay.
It's marble.
It's marble.
Yeah. It
How
looks
many
like
stories is this place?
It's pretty huge. 3 stories.
That we know of.
And this central atrium is interesting, not only because it's open to the sky with Elbereth in the middle here, but it gives you this sense of space, right? This is a large house and a peculiar house, and we can show you to some of the interesting rooms. Let's say Bilbo's room is down on this floor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is Bilbo's room over here?
Yep, with the purple card.
I mean,
Yep, that's the one.
this feels like the atrium of a really nice hotel.
Yeah, it's got that resort
Yeah.
feel.
Yeah,
where you-
exactly. Right.
Okay, so here's Bilbo's room.
Excuse me.
It's like the Grand Floridian. That's what I was thinking of.
Yes.
Yep.
This is Frodo and Gandalf hanging out in Bilbo's room.
And if you stand too close,
My goodness, you look at
Frodo,
Bilbo's
you
height
get a
and then
hit
you
of-
realize the height of the room. That would be the equivalent of us walking into like a room with 80-foot ceilings or something.
Right.
It's massive.
Yeah.
It really is huge. Yeah, and it's pretty cool. If you stand close to Frodo, you can get influenced by the sense of the presence of the ring.
Makes you feel herby.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever noticed that. Of course, I haven't played in like 3 years.
Yeah, so you get that little flash of light.
and you get a
everything seems
+1
little-
dread.
Little dim. Yep.
Yeah. Now, of course, in Rivendell, so this. So Sean, since you've never played, this is my favorite game mechanic. So you'll notice how my mini map over here is kind of glowing blue around the edges.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
That's because your character always has you are on a scale of hope and dread, right? So when you're in a happy place like Rivendell or the Shire or Lothlorien, your character has high hope, which gives you basically more hit points and gives you an advantage in your attacks and stuff. You have greater fortitude both to resist evil and to strike against it. When you are in evil places or near evil things like Nazgul, for instance, are the extreme example of this, then your dread rises and it weakens you and it'll paralyze you if you go so that you can't move at all if your dread drops below a certain point. So the fact that they actually invented a game mechanic to reflect that like really quite sort of immaterial process, right, in the books, just that sense of of not only the importance of hope and what hope means in the Lord of the Rings, but that general sense of like
But the idea of fear as a weapon. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
That it's exactly the kind of thing which so often, games which are just kind of really simply built on a kind of, Dungeons and Dragons base is,
Right.
doesn't really try to recreate, but I just love that.
Yeah, I like
That's
how
super
you
cool.
don't die in res in this game.
Oh.
What it is your stats
Your audio
instead
gone?
of.
I
Oh, is
can't
my
hear
audio gone? Oh dear. Testing.
I can hear
testing.
you. I can
Oh,
hear.
okay.
I can hear you too.
Okay, I can
All
hear
right.
you again. Just for a minute,
Okay.
it cut out.
Oh, yeah, it's probably Wi-Fi. So, like, instead of your typical D&D
Oh, I
game, you
realized what
have
happened.
like
I was
your.
looking at the Twitch stream and saw your mouth moving, but didn't hear
Oh,
any
okay.
sound.
But you have you have your mana and you have your like your health and your magic are usually the
Mhm.
stats they give you. But in
Right.
this one, what they have instead is they have your morale and your power. So it's about your will to fight and your ability to fight. So you don't die. You just either
Yeah.
become hopeless and so hopeless you can't move, or so powerless you can't fight back.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's pretty cool.
I didn't hear any.
It's
game
something. It's
audio.
something uniquely Tolkienian.
Yeah.
It is. It is.
So we're blue right now. So is that? I'm obviously we're on the positive end of the hope scale here. Is this as good as it gets, or is there
Just
a place
about.
that?
Well, if you step back away from Frodo, then it's as good as it gets.
Right.
Oh, okay. So being around Frodo actually brings us down a little bit because of the
Yeah,
presence of the ring.
Because of the ring, yeah.
He's
Mhm.
depressing.
Frodo, just negative vibes. By the way, I was not able to get any game audio in my. I don't know if because I left and came back. Whether maybe I need to.
Oh, I think
Something needs to be rerouted.
Yeah, are you?
I should be getting my audio from GoToWebinar.
But you also
from
need
Discord.
It from Discord too. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I should turn off my speakers in there and turn on my.
Here, and I'll take you guys to Elrond's study. We can meet Elrond, and then I'll take out to meet Glorfindel, and then we can head out to our last site. It's already getting late, so.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
Oh, yes,
interesting to
was
note
that
that
another
the
Leafian?
Elbereth in here has yellow hair.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. It's almost like a different style even.
Ah, my scholar, my dwarven rune keeper has spent much time in this place.
Yes.
Yep.
So here's Elrond. Pretty casual, he's in his study here. He has the circlet on his brow, but not real fancy. One thing I always find striking in seeing visual representations of Elrond, and I think this has to do with the deliberately kind of paradoxical descriptions of Elrond, right? How he's, he's venerable like a king of many winters, and but hale as a tried warrior in the fullness of his strength. But I find that despite those descriptions, I seem still always to picture Elrond when I'm reading the book as old, basically. Like I can't stop imagining him as like a white-haired guy, just because like the antiquity of Elrond is the thing that keeps getting emphasized, right?
Right.
And I'm not saying that this is inaccurate. I think that this is quite right. But like almost every time in the game I come and talk to Elrond, I'm always like, you look like a teenager. Holy
He
cow.
looks very young. Yeah.
But that I think
It's that I know what the secret is, Sean. You know what the secret is, right?
No,
It's oil of
the
Olway.
oil of Olway. Yeah.
Oil of Olway.
Moisturize. Gotta moisturize. Yeah, no, he's got that face like my French Canadian husband. He's gonna look like he's 12 until he's 60 years old.
Yeah. Yeah.
right. Yeah, he looks a little grim, but not too severe. Not quite Hugo Weaving levels of severity.
No.
Exactly.
No.
Welcome.
The
A bit
eyebrows.
more approachable, but
He
he's
had
seen
the
some
best
stuff.
eyebrows.
Yeah.
They both look like they'd be very good at hobbitry.
Both of
Yeah.
his eyebrows.
No, both the game Elrond and Hugo Weaving.
Well, at least
No.
he has two of them.
No, this is his serious eyebrow, and this is his party eyebrow.
Right.
Okay,
It's like
we
the
should
business
visit
on
the
the
Hall
left
of
and party
Fire,
on the right.
too.
Very
The
appropriate.
Hall of Burns. The Hall.
Lindear's in here crying in a corner.
No, actually, he's standing right here with Bilbo Baggins.
Lindear and Bilbo are both here.
Bilbo suddenly grew some mutton chops, though.
Yeah, I saw
Yeah.
that. What's that?
Wait,
It
did
has
you
been a
have
long
this
time, my old friend. No.
That's very Hildebrand, isn't it?
The Hildebrand mutton
He's got
chop.
the Hildebrand mutton chops.
Yeah. It was the Hildebrand mutton chops.
He's
I own the
got a
clock.
whole- He's
collector
got a
cards.
whole like Amish chin strap going on there, doesn't
Oh my
he?
god, he sure
Oh, wow,
does.
yeah, he sure
Yes.
does.
Shan't tell a poem. That'd be idleness.
Maybe that's my next facial hairstyle right there. What do you think?
And his clothes
Um,
have changed too. right?
Let's talk about it.
No.
Yellow and
no.
green. They
Yeah.
gave him more traditional yellow-green Hobbit look.
Wow.
Is this
Wow.
new? Were they different?
Yeah,
before?
this is totally new. I've never seen this.
seen Bilbo looking like this before. Did this just change today?
No,
Might
this has
have.
been a couple months.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
This was in an
Couple
earlier
months.
update.
So this is a real serious newbie question, but I noticed that Bilbo has this sort of shadowy ring above him.
Yeah.
Elrond had a bright gold ring above his head. Do we see the characters that have rings of power or that have
Yeah,
had rings
no.
of power?
No.
These are
It's
no.
more
quest
general than
rings.
that.
Yeah.
It just
Okay.
means that you can pick up a quest from this person.
And in the case of Bilbo,
okay.
it's a useless no XP quest because it's way below your level.
Yes.
Okay. I know that was a completely ridiculous newbie question, but
No,
No,
it wasn't
it's good.
actually.
That's
No,
question.
that's a valid question.
We're
Remember, lots
actually
of people are listening.
I mean, I'll mock you for it later, but
That's fine,
just
yeah.
me.
Well, I was talking about starting a show here on this channel to teach people those very questions. So,
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's right.
Oh.
That's right. Hey,
Cool.
did they mess with Lindear too?
maybe.
He looks way
looks
more
more
like
like,
than I recall.
Like Figwit.
Yeah. Brett McKenzie.
Huh.
Flight of the Concords.
I love his little booties though. Those are cute.
I'm sorry. Can you say that one more time? I want to make
his
sure I understood you
booties,
correctly.
plural.
Booties,
Booties,
like
Okay.
you know,
Because,
cable
you
text
know,
where
I
you're
just
Oh,
wanna
no,
make
that's not
sure.
bad either. No.
That's right. I wasn't checking out Lindear here. I'm just saying.
I
There's
don't know.
nothing wrong
For
with that.
academic
On.
purposes. Academic booty.
That's
Here-
right.
here.
That's right. And there is a quest. Isn't there a quest where you can get like where you're talking with Lindear and Bilbo about poetry, right?
Mm.
Isn't that
Riddles. I think it was a riddle.
Yeah,
the-
there is a
the
riddle
riddle.
quest. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's the. Okay. So looking at around the room now, Okay. So the details that we're told about the room. We're told that there's one great hearth, which they've decided to put at the end of the room. Here.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
When we were talking about the description, of course we spent time carefully looking at the description of the room about 3 months ago, and we had decided that the hearth was probably in the center of the room, as that seemed to make most sense in the way the one hearth was described in relationship to other things. I can see this. I don't necessarily I don't necessarily disagree with this take, even though they've made the one hearth into kind of a triple hearth, but that's okay. The tables, though, I don't know about the tables, and the floors. We need some carpet or something in here because, like, people have to be able to sit
yeah.
on the floors.
I
Well,
do want
and
to.
Yeah.
singing in
it a
here would
little
be
warmer.
singing in here would be very difficult. If you're
Yes.
actually trying
Yeah.
to tell a story acoustically, this is a nightmare.
Yes.
Yeah.
Audio reflections everywhere. It's an audio engineer's nightmare.
Yeah.
Maybe it's sound absorbing stone.
Yeah.
I mean, this looks like a really nice dining hall.
Yes.
Maybe it's just those
Yes.
tables that are doing that for me, but
Uh,
Yeah.
For some reason, just the big fire and lots of stories. I was kind of always picturing like squashy armchairs or some elven equivalent, or chaise
Yeah.
lounges
The
or
floor should
Roman
at least just look
benches,
comfortable to sit on. One way or
Yeah.
another.
Right. Right.
rugs. Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, I admit that this room has never been among my favorites as far as just their interpretation of what's there in the book. It doesn't feel like that. It doesn't feel like it. This feels different. It's nice, but it doesn't feel like the Hall of Fire feels to me in the book. But it certainly fits with the rest of the architecture of the house a little better.
Yeah.
But couldn't
we
at
should
least
mention
gotten a
about
few of
we
these
should
things?
mention about the architecture. This is one of the buildings that was closely modeled on one of Tolkien's own illustrations as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, exactly. Yeah. The picture that if you remember the view that we were
the
looking
bridge.
at when we first came in from across the bridge.
Yeah.
And the house there looks very much like the house as Tolkien painted it in his
right.
Rivendell painting there. So yeah, that was a direct modeling. Okay, last stop before we hit our last stop. Last local stop here in Rivendell. I'm not even going to bother with the bridge. It can only lead to tears. And that is through the bushes.
Oh,
here.
yes. Yep.
We gotta go cross country here up to Glorfindel.
Yes.
Is this the walk that Frodo wanted to take, but he couldn't because the council was starting?
No, that's up. He wanted to do some serious. See the pine woods
Up
there
yeah,
on the
that's right.
heights. Yeah, he wanted to do some serious hiking.
Some serious hiking.
So yeah, the slopes of the mountains all around have pine woods on as a reference to that line. Which, by the way, I have found the game extremely reliable. Like, if something specific is referred to in the text, they almost always succeed in putting that in the. So, like, Sean, you will appreciate this. When I got to the House of Tom Bombadil in the game for the first time, the very first thing I did was run around the back to see if there were lines of beans on poles right outside the windows, and there totally are.
And there were.
that's great.
So,
Yep.
yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, you can find a slashed cloak on the doorstep of the house at Crick Hollow.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Almost all of the things that are actively referred to are totally there.
That's cool.
And yes, as people are pointing out, we are at 15 hope now, standing in the presence of Glorfindel. Standing in the presence of Glorfindel is where you max out your hope. I don't even think standing in front of Galadriel gives you more hope than this. Yeah, so he's surveying. This is up near where the flood came from. So there are some pretty cool quests that you can go on. There's one quest that you can go on where you actually fight with Glorfindel against incursion of dark sorcerers who are coming in, and that's pretty fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, Christy.
You guys
you're
are doing
right.
such a good job of selling me on this game, I have to say.
It is great. I haven't had time to
Why
play in the last couple of years.
This is a dangerous conversation I'm having right now.
It is.
I know.
It is. I have to say,
It's free to play.
I deliberately did not start playing Lotro I held out for several years, just for fear of losing years of my life that I couldn't afford to lose. But
Good thing that didn't happen.
yeah, it's true, true. Good thing I dodged that bullet. Yeah, absolutely.
No, that was my favorite. It was you running around trying to look at the architecture, and me and Rachel trying to kill everything that came near so you could keep talking.
Yes, yeah.
Draw aggro.
That's right. That's the really funny thing when I'm in some kind of really dangerous place, and I'll stop even pretending to fight, and I'll just be going around doing guided tours while all this chaos is exploding all around us, and flames and
Lord Squirrel.
Now there's lag. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's thank you, Phoenix. If you're gonna, so we're gonna port to Erebor now.
Ooh, I can't wait to see
All
this. This will
right.
be new to me.
Oh, you haven't seen this one, Alan?
No, my character's only level 66. I don't think I could make it to Erebor.
Yes, you
Erebor's-
can.
Well,
Oh, really?
it's-
Of
What's
course,
your
I'm also.
character name?
it's
There's a
tricky.
fun story about Girls of Mythgard involving level 24 hobbits and a moose.
Oh man, yeah. It
And-
was this
and a
classic
moose?
moment when
And a moose.
Yeah,
they
they
were
aggroed.
standing around, like they were in a stream and they were about to start touring around Lake Town when all of a sudden this moose comes charging out of nowhere and assaults them all.
Like it crossed a river to kill us. It was
Yeah,
it was
it
just
did.
That's awesome.
Totally.
Wow.
It was rabid. Sadly, they had to put it down, I think. But
Yeah. yeah.
like we could put it down. We're level 4, level 24 hobbit.
Okay, who else do I need to invite to the fellowship so I can summon?
A moose once bit my sister. Sorry. There's your
Right?
requisite.
You moose bites can be
No,
pretty
really.
nasty.
Yeah.
This is the only place you can summon under-level characters.
okay. All right.
Ah,
Yeah.
interesting.
So here we are. Oh.
Edible.
Okay, now I've never seen this place. So let's see. Map. Where are we in Erebor? The Grand Theater.
Tomb
Okay.
Doom.
Exit to the
Theater.
Dale Lands and to the
The
Hall under the
theater.
mountain. Okay. Oh, and then their new mining loads. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Alan,
yeah.
Sean, what character name should I be inviting to the fellowship?
Well, unfortunately, oh, you mean for future purposes? If I can ever get my game to launch, because
Oh, yeah.
tonight I'm not in
Oh,
there.
sorry.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
he's not in here. So.
And
Okay.
and I have none.
Right.
We're gonna fix that.
Yeah, no, we are going to
Yeah.
fix that for Sean, and I'll just have to play on my gaming PC rather than
think
this booth
they-
Mac.
Oh, there's the stairs. Okay. I haven't been to
Okay.
this part either.
Yeah,
This
dwarven
is all new to me.
architecture. Dwarven architecture is massive.
Yeah.
It's all these
Very
just
geometrical.
very
Yes.
geometrical,
Art Deco.
all sorts of yeah.
So
Yeah, Art
you,
Deco
you
too,
can,
yeah.
You can immediately see the difference in flavor between dwarf and elvish architecture. Looking at the design.
There's nothing subtle about dwarven architecture. Nothing subtle. It is
Yeah, lots
beautiful,
of like
but in a different
Celtic
way.
knot stuff, like we can see
Uh-huh.
there along the
Mhm.
sort of the rails on the stairs there.
Ooh, look at the column tops.
And
Everything
you got
seems
these
over-engineered,
columns.
too.
These
You know,
columns
everything's-
almost remind me of something like almost Bronze Age or something, like something from Crete or something like that.
Sumeria? Sumeria always had the. No, there's one of the Middle Eastern ones had the ones with the big old beards and the frowny people.
Okay. Yeah,
Babylonian?
for some reason I'm thinking of something like Minoan or Mycenaean or something, but I could be
Oh, yeah, I could
could be
see
way
that
off.
too. They're like their big old beards too.
yeah.
So
Oh, I love
is
that.
this
Yeah.
this dwarf king like drooling onto this water wheel? Is that
He's
what's happening here?
sleeping, and it's just sort of
Yeah.
just gonna.
Yeah, it's kind
Too
of
much-
a little bit of
Too much
dribbling.
dwarven ale.
But the dwarves are
No,
like,
such
At least
as
he's
not
not made of
Yeah.
liquid gold.
The teacher's gonna call his name in a minute. And he's gonna lift his head up off his desk.
Wow. See, that's a beard that would get wet. in
Yes.
the-
Oh, there's foam all up in that beard. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you bet there is.
absolutely.
Moria liked the big gaping mouths that were drooling waterfalls.
I'm really interested in the fact that they have kept so much of the rough-hewn walls, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
That they haven't just smoothed all this out, so that we don't have the feeling. It retains the sense that you are underground in a mountain, right?
Mhm.
Yes.
While
Yes.
still having all of the very clear architectural features, so
Mhm.
that
point.
you're in the and we've got a grating on the floor here, so you can see.
Yep.
down
Yeah,
below,
it's very ornamental. It's very wrought,
Yes.
but it is it retains that natural stone.
Mm-hmm.
They're still
Wow.
repairing it, you can see.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
which room was this again?
Excuse me.
I know you just had the map up a moment ago, Corey, but
Oh, so yeah, no, this is
Erebor.
this is in one of the parts of Erebor. So the Grand
Trying to
Theater.
Okay,
is
so-
where we were.
so we're right there. Okay.
Grand Theater.
I'm
I wonder
gonna-
what was performed here at the Grand Theater.
That's what I was wondering. Do dwarves have theater?
I wouldn't have looked for one.
Right.
I kind
guess-
of wonder if it's less like a performance hall for thespians and more of a like auditorium.
Yeah. for the king to gather his people and make a speech.
to address people. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It didn't.
Well, they're very fond of their history and their language. I get the feeling it'd be tied up in either some sort of,
Possibly.
Edda
Or perhaps
storytelling.
mockery of elves. I mean, trying to get back at them for the whole stunted people thing.
True.
Yes.
It's all satire. It's like SNL, but for dwarves,
Right, yeah,
They have their
Elf
they have their
mockery
masks.
palooza.
They have their masks that look like babies, and they walk around going, "Oh, my fork is bent." Ooh."
Yeah, the only kind of theater they do is just lampoons of the.
Exactly.
Mock
Mostly
stock.
fart jokes. Yeah, it's
Interesting. Okay, hang on. Where am I? Okay, I need to get. How do you get down? Where's the stairs?
Over here.
Well, you kind of like you do the bridges in Rivendell. You just go right over the edge and see what happens.
yeah. Oh,
So from these heights, I suspect I know what would happen.
I'm sure. Yes, that's one thing. I'm not surprised to see that this has similar designs to Moria in that it's very vertical.
Yeah.
There's a lot of layers upon layers. It's very, it's disorienting.
well, it saves space to have this much, zigzagged and accordioned in on itself.
Right.
Yeah. Dwarf opera. That's actually probably exactly what it is.
Yeah, I was thinking like opera or like mask theater, maybe.
What's in those barrels? I think we all know.
Alcohol.
Alcohol.
Yeah.
Cheese.
Jeez.
Oh,
Apples. Very small rocks.
Very small rocks. Yes,
churches.
Cider.
Lead.
That was brilliant.
If you leave the apples in there long
We're
enough, it
done.
becomes-
We're not going to get any better than that tonight, folks. Let's sign off.
Oh, Corey, I hate to say it, but I'm not seeing a lot of long beardian elements.
I'm not seeing a lot of long beardian elements either. I think this is. It's got. So yeah, sorry. We've been doing. I talk about our attention to architecture. So we've been going through the Blue Mountains area,
Right.
and we have been looking at the different historical strata of ruins and things. So we're looking at we've been noticing the difference between the Longbeard construction from the time of Thorin, and then the earlier architecture, which is there's another tribe of dwarves that they sort of invented for the game, the Dour Hands, who were there before. So I think we want to go this way to the Dalelands, right?
Ooh.
Well, do you want to see the king?
Do we want to see the king? Maybe we.
King
want
is to
see
the
king.
north.
Sure.
Exit is to the south.
Is Dan far away?
No.
Is it good to see the king?
Maybe I'll mount up.
It's good to see the king.
You can only ride goats in here.
I can ride my horse in here.
And horse. Just can't ride war steed.
Okay, I can't ride.
Who let the elk in here? That's an elvish steed.
Yeah, it's kind of sketchy, I have to say.
It's big enough for an elk in here.
Try it all the way to the end.
But is it big enough for a giant prehistoric elk?
Well, that's a sea pet. That's a baby elf. It's not but a wee bairn.
Okay. I see I was dismounted coming through.
I love the big purple chandeliers in the middle. Those are always so pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
I
crystal
like
ones,
shiny things.
and those are, Alan, as you were noticing, very like Moria, the same
Yeah.
kind of crystal and
Uh-huh.
light structures.
Yep. Just like we find another dwarven strongholds.
Mm-hmm.
And of
This is
course the
pretty cool.
dwarven banners with the Lonely Mountain, the Raven, and the Arkenstone.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah. And
Ah,
we've got
yeah.
the ravens here on either side.
Hmm.
Do you want to go see Thorin's sister on the way down today?
Oh, it's very like Odin with the two ravens.
Yeah, it is. Oh man, look at the way the whole hall comes in, and you can see that the throne is still really far away and comparatively
Yeah.
tiny, right? But the way, and it's in the mouth of the king. Oh, that's
They
kind
like
of
their
cool.
giant floating heads, don't they?
Oh, that's actually really pretty awesome.
The fun thing, this had actually started. They put this in Mordor, in that expansion 2 years ago, and it was just this end hall with all the.
Huh.
It was the allegiance hall for the door. And we also
You
need
just
one
walk right up
more.
to the king. Hi, king.
Right. The guards
Howdy
don't mind,
doody.
fortunately.
You don't have to get through, many layers of bodyguards. You're just apparently
He knows he
important
can
enough to
take
walk
you.
right up.
Right. And look at that beard.
Oh,
My
that beard.
goodness.
That
is-
rocks,
that's
man.
an
That is a
impressive beard.
serious beard.
Tucked into the belt and everything.
Yeah, yeah.
Like a
Man.
glorious undercooked challah.
And how long would that thing be if he unbraided it? I mean,
Right.
that's just massive.
Can you imagine
Long
if-
enough to dip
if he-
his
if he
beard in the-
unbraided it and spread it out, it would be like 5 feet in diameter.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Wow.
My goodness. That's
That's
quite an
cool.
outfit.
That is so cool.
I know.
Can we turn around? I want to see this massive hall from.
Oh, yeah, the scope of the hall.
Good
Okay.
light interference.
Well, it's so big that it actually fades off into the horizon.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Yeah, it sure does.
Yeah, the draw
Yeah.
distance of his PC isn't good enough to see the other end.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. I like
That's
the little
cool.
fountains off to the side, so we get these little sort of
Yeah.
alcoves over here, which are
Yeah, yeah.
quiet and peaceful.
Oh yeah.
Oh man, yeah.
There's like 2 levels above on either side,
Right?
above and below.
Right.
Mhm.
Not worried about security.
Nope.
I mean,
Yeah, great place for snipers to hide. I mean,
absolutely.
that's
I mean, the lines of fire to the king are numerous here,
yeah, this is a bad idea.
and he's unarmed. I mean, he's wearing.
He's hiding like a mace in that beard or something.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I
is,
know,
right?
it's-
Yeah,
Probably
It's a
He's just got
bulletproof
this little
beard.
guy. He's got this little guy who's not
Yeah, he
talking
has a
and not
bodyguard.
moving.
in there.
He's gonna kill you 5 times before you hit the ground. Just look at him. He's not even moving. He doesn't
Yeah.
care.
Yeah, do it, Corey. Do it.
No, I'm not
Oh,
going
you're
to
gonna
sit on the
sit-
throne.
sit on the
no.
You
throne?
sat on the throne of
Come on.
Elendil. Come
I
on.
did
He
sit
sat
on
on
the throne
cursed
for a while.
thrones.
That's true. Okay. Well, Narnian doesn't have the cheek to do that. See, he knows he didn't earn his way here, like Wiggend and Grifflet do. I love the Raven and Arkenstone, by the way. The Arkenstone beneath the mountain, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's a really cool.
That's really cool.
Yeah, the
banner.
symbolism.
Wisdom
of
and
that is-
hubris.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very cool. Okay.
Can you actually sit?
You can. You have to climb up on it.
Not gonna do it. Not gonna do it. Who's Badger?
That is a honey badger.
You're gonna have a honey badger as a pet?
Yep.
Yeah, I guess.
Oh,
And Gareth does it. Gareth's the cheeky one. Well played.
okay. All right. Let's go to Dale.
All right.
Let's go to Dale. Oh yeah, Narnian doesn't have a goat.
Uh-huh.
That's going to be a short trip.
To Dale?
Yep. It
Yeah,
is a short
'cause-
trip, but there's going to be bad guys on the way.
That's what I meant. You're going to be picked off in the first 2
it's
seconds.
gonna be a short trip for
Oh.
me. Yeah.
One
Well,
shot.
no. If you get killed when you're level 9, I may be able to summon you. Maybe.
We'll see.
Hmm.
But I trust you. You guys can all protect me. That won't be hard.
Yeah, I can.
No, I'm,
Valori's toast, but yeah.
yeah, I'm gonna be running for my life, man.
Oh, you're 83? Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm 83 in Valori.
Yeah. You're
We'll
level
see if
83.
your nameplate goes red when you go outside.
Yeah. Oh, it's already red right now.
I was talking about Corey's.
Oh,
mine
yeah.
does? We'll see.
Yeah, because if the name place under the mini map is red, you can't be rezzed or summoned.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see. We're running super late here.
Yeah.
But let's see if we can get a glimpse of Lake Town, maybe. Well, we won't do a full
Well,
tour
Lake
of
Town.
Dale. How far away is Lake Town? Pretty far, right?
Lake Town is a little far, yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
but we can definitely get you down to Dale.
Is there a stable master in Erebor I could use?
Yeah, right down here at the end of the stairs. You have to get outside first.
I get outside first. Okay. All right.
Well,
Well, you've got a war steed. You can ride your war steed down there pretty quick.
Let me try the stable master because we're on Landreval, so I should have mithril coins.
And it's a swift travel.
Great.
I could actually summon you down there once I get down there myself, but no, you should be fine.
So
So Lori, is it
looking
red?
at the gates of the king here?
What was that?
Is the name read to you on the mini map?
Oh yeah.
Oh gosh.
Like I said, we did this with little 24 bergs the second time
Mhm.
around, so
Wait,
Let's
past
just-
the stable master. Okay.
I'm just gonna make a break for it. Run, 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 run.
Well met.
Running, running,
All
running,
right,
running
I want
past
to
all
go
the
to
things.
Lake Town. Yes. All right. Okay, so we'll skip Dale. So we'll show you guys Lake Town, and then we will sign off. It's as it is late. So this, of course, is New Lake Town.
Oh, that's not Lake Town. That's ruins full of things.
Keep going, keep going.
I'm going, I'm going, I'm going. I don't know what I'm doing.
Well, home in on my dot.
Ah, it's a warthog. Ah, I got and a wolf.
Keep going, keep going.
I'm going, I'm going, I'm going, I'm
You
going.
got it.
Okay, I'm at the gate. Where's the door? Where's the door? Where's the door?
So,
Oh, and there's
Alan
a
and
lake.
Sean, as you can see, one of the interesting things about the rebuilt Lake Town is that there's like a dragon theme in the architecture.
Ah,
of the
yeah, I
rebuilt
see
Lake
that.
Town. All right, so we've got these dragon shapes above the arches and things. So they are, and the Lake Town guards too. If you look at the guy, I love this. Look at the insignia on his chest. It's the dragon falling.
Oh,
that's so
yes,
cool.
that is awesome.
That is so
That is
cool.
just absolutely awesome.
Yeah, I love how
Love
they
that.
integrate the shape of the falling Smaug.
That's great.
Wow. That is really cool. What a detail that
That
is.
is super
Yeah,
cool.
Look out, there are low railings on this bridge, Corey. I just
Yeah,
want to
I
make sure
know.
you're aware of that.
I know. It's Lake Town is pretty dangerous. Like if you look over here, you'll see
Oh, you can fish off the bridge.
that little box over there is an
Yeah.
outhouse. There are public
Oh,
privies
okay.
all around here. You know, you gotta which of course just hang out over the lake.
Right.
Right. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't drink the water. Yeah.
Very realistic approach to
Yeah.
public sanitation here.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just make sure it's upstream from your house
Exactly.
or downstream from your house. Sorry.
Downstream, yeah.
Well, it depends on whether it was built by the lowest bidders or not.
Yeah. Yes. As Catriona says, these are the only latrines in all of Middle Earth. Really, it's we have no idea what other people do. But I love, yes, you've got the dragon stuff all over the place. You've got it at the
Excuse me.
the roofs of
Oh yeah.
houses.
Yeah. Look at that.
You've got it in the arches.
Wow.
You know, they really sort of celebrate the rising from the ashes. The dragon, of course, is their symbol on the banner. Now the dragon pierced by the black arrow is their symbol on the banner.
Nice.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Even though
that's it.
Bard goes off to refound Dale and everything, Lake Town, the new Lake Town still remembers.
Yeah.
Still part of their history.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't, obviously I haven't seen Edoras or anything in Rohan, but this feels very, this feels very Rohan to me.
Yes.
It's got,
That's well observed. Yeah.
it's got, I don't know what it is, but maybe it's sort of an Anglo-Saxon look to it, and that fits, right? Because these are Northmen, these are
Right.
cousins, aren't they?
Yes.
Even more so.
Yeah, exactly. And there's just like a touch of the Breetown
I'm here.
architecture in the in the but hey, you made it, Valori. There you go.
Yay, I'm alive.
In
Yay.
the like in the pattern of the wood and stuff, right? The sort of the wood, though it's not wood and plaster, it's wood and planks, right? It's all
Right.
made out of wood.
Right.
But yeah, no, it's true. And in Rohan,
Because you should always build with wood if there's a dragon nearby. Really, that's
Absolutely,
really
yeah.
what you should build with.
What
it's
could
it's
go
it's
wrong?
done in deliberate defiance of the dragon. You know, it's all.
Yeah.
Fire insurance is very hard
We,
to come by.
we killed that dragon. We can build with wood now.
That's
Well,
right.
remember, they also have to float on the lake as well, so that might have something to do with it.
That's right.
And it's
Well, they still
also
could have built
cheaper
it
to
out of
repair.
small rocks.
cheaper. Churches, lead.
Right.
Okay, I'm actually gonna. One last thing we'll do before we go is to find the ruins of the old lake town and the bones of the dragon.
Oh yeah.
Oh, so we can see the rotting dragon carcass?
Yes.
Yes.
Yay. Oh, I never noticed the flags look like the Welsh flag.
And that's yes, except they've killed this one.
Poor
That's
Merlin.
That's off to the south, right? Down here.
Yes, it is to the south.
I should probably skirt around the deer relatively widely because.
Yeah,
Yes,
if you
assume
stay on
everything
the
lines up
actual road, it's better.
Okay.
I took a level 8 through here once solo. As long as you stay on the path, you're generally pretty.
What's that glowing in the distance? Blue glow.
That is a ship.
Groovy.
Okay, so we're approaching. Yeah.
Looks like a witch's house.
Oh, there are the bones.
Just don't get too close because there are bad guys there.
Oh, of course there'd be.
Oh,
Now
wow.
that's Desolation of Smaug right there.
Boy, you're not kidding.
Okay, so here's the burned piles of the old town.
Wow. Wow.
That is
Yeah.
so cool.
Pretty cool.
If you perform certain quests, you can actually get a mini version to sit in your lawn and scare away your neighbors in the Lotro housing.
Esgaroth of old. And so again, they've done the same thing with the scale. Like, of course, Tolkien describes the bones of the dragon being, down underwater.
Right.
But you, oh yes, and here are the.
I'm gonna kill dudes to
Oh.
Thank you.
them off you.
Appreciate that. So these, of course, like the wing bones of Smaug sticking way up above the water like this.
Right.
Not how it's described in the book, but again, it creates the.
I'm fine. Oh, you're
I'm not.
down.
Run
That's
away!
okay.
Run away!
One shot.
Yeah, Narnian is kind of a wimp because he's never done
Slotted
anything.
any stats.
Slotted any stats, done anything, in fact. Other than stand around and talk. That's pretty much his job. Anyhow,
Hey, I caught a fish.
what I was saying was, again, that the sense of, the ominous presence of the bones of Smaug, the way they've made them larger so that happens when you see them from a distance, right? You don't just come and swim over and see down in the depths of the water the bones of the dragon.
Right.
Right.
It creates this sort of larger atmospheric effect. You can just...
Ported me all the way to Harik and Rohan.
Oh man, to Harwick?
Because it ports you to your milestone.
Yep,
Oh,
that's
okay.
the one.
Okay, cool.
And it's Harik.
All right,
Oh well, you guys go ahead.
no problem. Well, we're wrapping up anyway. I wanted to
Okay.
end here at the bones of Smaug. I don't think there are any bad guys right here. So there we go. I can't
That's
actually jump
amazing.
up onto the skull of Smaug. But,
Wow.
Oh, you can.
yeah.
Wow.
Anyway, there we are.
That's so cool.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for joining us tonight. We're
Yeah.
ending late, but that's okay. It was a special episode. And of course, many thanks to our special guests, Sean and Alan, for joining us tonight as your exploring the Lord of the Rings experience here.
Thank you for having us, Corey.
Yeah, absolutely. It's our pleasure.
And best of luck to you in your rapid discussion the rest of the way. I you know, it's been really fun. I think that the you know, our two discussions of the Lord of the Rings are sort of delightfully kind of complementary, I think, in lots of ways that I think are really,
I agree.
Are really fun. And I know there are, as you were noticing, many listeners that we share together and are really enjoying both discussions. So
Absolutely.
Great having you guys with us. We'll have to see you guys again sometime. Maybe we'll have you guys on again when you finish the book and can come back and laugh at us for still being in the Mines of Moria or something at that point.
There you go.
That's right.
Holland.
We might make it to Holland by then. I think we probably. Yeah.
We'll give you all sorts of spoilers.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh no.
Exactly.
We have come from the future.
That's right.
Yeah, excellent. So, okay, so thank you, everybody, and I will be back next week. I should be Tuesdays through November here. So we should be just regular schedule, almost regular schedule as normal. Actually, we'll be making a change to the server schedule, which I'll explain next time. But as far as the actual calendar goes, I'll be here all month. So very good. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Right.
Good night.
Thanks for
Bye,
having us.
guys.
Good night. Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Good night.
Bye.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for joining me on this epic exploration of The Lord of the Rings and of Standing Stone's video adaptation of Tolkien's story. If you are having even half the fun I'm having on this journey, I hope you will consider supporting the project by donating at signumuniversity.org/fund.